Madam Roll Call.
We're going to start with our guests, Mr. Ken Metcalf, Mr. William Arbery, Mayor, Council Seat 1.
Here.
Ms. Kalisha Buchanan, Webb, Council Member Seat 4. Ms. Sarita C. Johnson, Council Member Seat 2. Mr. Clarence R. McConnell, Council Member Seat 5. He's absent, Madam Chair. Ms. Lisa Davis Quince? Thank you. And then also with the town of Mangonia Park, do we have any other officials that I didn't call? Would you state your name for the record?
Yes, ma'am. Anthony Bernard, town attorney.
Thank you. And then from the city of Riviera Beach, we have Mayor Ronnie Felder, Councilperson Douglas Lawson.
Here.
Vice Chair Lanier. Councilperson McCoy.
Here.
Board Member McCoy. Chairperson Miller Anderson.
Present.
Board Member Dr. Botel. She's absent, Madam Chair. And then for city staff, we have Mr. Jonathan Evans, City Manager.
Present.
Mr. Lowe, Executive Director. Tawana Smith, Interim District Clerk, is present. Don Wynn, City Attorney.
Here.
Randy Sherman, Finance Director. In his place, Madam Chair, we have Ms. Nydia Reynolds, Assistant Finance Director. She's also accompanied by Ms. Paula Keith, Customer Service Manager. And then Glenn Torsivia, he's our outside counsel. You have a quorum, Madam Chair.
All right, we'll have a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Board Member McCoy.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any additions, deletions, or substitutions?
None from staff, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Just one quick thing, we will accept public comment cards. In our agenda, the public agenda that was published online, we advertised that we would accept public comment cards. So we're going to be accepting them, and public comment cards will be at 6:45, and it'll end then. The acceptance of public comments will end at 6:45.
Okay. Any disclosures? Can have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Madam Clerk?
Chairperson Miller Anderson.
Yes.
Vice Chair Lanier. Board Member McCoy.
Yes.
Board Member Lawson.
Yes.
That vote passes, Madam Chair.
Okay, we don't have a consent agenda, so we'll move into item 8A.
Item 8A, renewal of water services agreement between the Utility Special District and the town of Mangonia Park.
All right, Mr. Evans?
Madam Chair and members of the board and also our guests, thank you for the opportunity to be in front of you this evening to bring you up to speed with respect to the conversations that have ensued concerning the relationship between the Utility Special District of the City of Riviera Beach and the town of Mangonia Park. Some time ago, the board knows that we entered into an agreement that is set to expire in 2023, May of 2023, and the city manager, the town manager of Mangonia Park, and I have gotten to a point where we need direction and clarity from the board as to how we wish to proceed. We are basically at a point of impasse and are seeking direction and clarity. Staff has prepared a brief presentation to give both our friends from Mangonia Park as well as the board and the public a chronological recap of the relationship and how we got to this particular point. Our hope from this conversation is to get some direction and clarity from both elected bodies as to how you wish to proceed and how you wish to resolve the outstanding issues. We do have bond counsel here to provide any additional commentary that the board may need. Also, our rate consultants are present online, And then we have Mr. Glenn Torsivia that has worked with us as it relates to the negotiation of the agreement that is set to expire in May of 2023. Again, this is an opportunity for both collegial bodies to have a discussion concerning the particular topic. This was at the request of the town of Mangonia Park to attempt to facilitate a resolution to this particular issue. At this time, Madam Chair, I will ask that the Assistant City Manager, Ms. Deirdre Jacobs, make a presentation and then bring up the appropriate parties to facilitate the staff's presentation. After staff is done with the presentation, we would facilitate an opportunity for the town of Mangonia Park to provide some additional commentary and then open it up for questions and dialogue between both elected bodies. Ms. Jacobs?
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Evans. Good evening. For the record, I'm Deirdre Jacobs, the Assistant City Manager, here with the City of Riviera Beach. We're here this evening as a result of staff speaking with Mr. Metcalf, the City Manager of, the Town Manager of the Town of Mangonia Park, wherein our discussions resulted in us being in a position where we were asked if we would come before you in order to seek guidance and direction. The staff that's here tonight to put on the presentations I would like to introduce would be Michael Lowe. He's our Executive Director of the Utility Special District, Mr. Skip Miller, and Mr. Stephen Bullock. They're with us as a part of Bond Council that have been working with us, over the years. For those persons that are not familiar with what has gone on over the past 15 years or so, back in 2005, the city entered into a wastewater services agreement with the town of Mangonia Park. That agreement was supposed to last for approximately 15 years. During that time, many things occurred, many activities, many discussions. There were times wherein the town of Mangonia Park had actually satisfied payments. There were times where there were issues with different rate increases that had occurred as well, whether or not there were agreements or disagreements, I would say, with regards to how those were handled. There were even instances where in Mangonia Park, at least even up to date, is fortunate, it's paid up on all of the dollars that were due to the city, with the exception of approximately $144,000, and we, the city, consider that to be a good thing. Some of the more prominent instances that occurred was back in 2019. Okay. Back in 2019, there was an outstanding balance of $535,000, $658.46. During that time, Mr. Evans, he was the city manager, had just returned, and he was able to work along with the town of Mangonia Park in order to effectuate extremely good progress, wherein monies were paid on that balance that totaled $355,079.79. Even up until that point, there were still instances where there were differences between the understanding of the agencies, and the city was still up under his leadership, was able to effectuate additional payments. At this point, as I mentioned earlier, we're down to only $144,000 of money that's in the arrears, wherein the town of Mangonia Park still owes the city. At this point in time, the city, as I mentioned earlier, is asking if both boards would please give staff guidance on how we move forward with making progress, especially considering what has occurred in the past. How is it that we move forward and come to some type of agreement in order to effectuate moving forward in a progressive manner? At this time, Mr. Lowe will come forward and display a PowerPoint presentation. Thank you.
Go ahead.
May I ask Ms. Jacobs a question, please?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the 144, can you explain that? I'm a little bit surprised with that.
So are you surprised that it exists, or the number? I'm
not sure what that is.
So what it is there was a balance that was still owed to the city. Back in 2019, the outstanding balance was $535,658.46. When Mr. Evans came on board, he was able to collect from the town of Mangonia $355,079.79. He was also able to collect another $50,000 in a lump sum, and that leaves the balance of the 144.
So, Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
if I may, I'd like put our attorney or the attorneys on the spot because this dispute was settled approximately 2 years ago, and that should have been at a zero balance. Ms. Mitty, if I may, Madam Chair.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Ken. I'm also surprised to hear that.
Can you pull your microphone up to you?
Closer?
Yes,
Get the feedback.
you're gonna have to pull it up a little more. Go ahead.
All right, is that better?
Yes.
I like the town manager. I'm also surprised to hear of that balance as the settlement agreement disposed of all past due amounts that was part of the settlement. So I'd like to receive an accounting of what that is alleged to be. Because as Manager Metcalf indicated, the settlement agreement disposed of all previously disputed amounts with the payment of that lump sum. So I'm also surprised about that.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
Yes, the settlement agreement called for a lump sum payment in the amount of $50,000, and then it increased the per 1,000-gallon rate to the town.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Go ahead.
to provide additional clarity, I think what staff was attempting to do was to show that there was, when you deduct the $50,000 payment, that conceivably, in order for the city to be made whole, there's a remaining outstanding balance of $149,000. Not that the town owes that, but in order with the increased rate, if the relationship stays in existence in some form or some fashion, that whatever the rate is, that was staff's attempt to show that out of that monies, there's still it's not a balance owed, but it's a balance that we as staff want to make sure from a financing perspective, if we write that off, that how do we look to recapture that, whether it's efficiencies, whether it's looking at other operational improvements, but that is the amount that basically as a result of the agreement that was left outstanding.
Madam Chair, if I may, so that it also speaks with clarity to the record.
Pull your microphone up,
Oh,
please.
certainly. Is that better? Okay. That amount, of course, as stated by our attorney as well as our town manager, is a surprise. One of the things, of course, that I'm sort of surmising at this point that I think what it is based upon the information shared by the town manager was that at the time we were assessed a rate that was higher than what your ordinance that was adopted actually called for. So there was an amount that was building that was a discrepancy based upon what we owed according to your documents and what we were being billed. So that amount, if you want to call it arrears or whatever terminology one wants to use, was an amount that had accumulated based upon that disagreement so that the record is
Hold
clear.
on, Mayor. Walter, it's kind of muffled over here on this side.
Okay, is that clear?
Could-
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead and keep talking.
Okay, that's right. Well, and so that, if there's anything at all that we're trying to understand what this 144 is, and that could be the only thing that could be, that I could attribute it to, that if indeed that is the understanding. However, as stated by both the town manager as well as our attorney, there was no balance done after that agreement was signed. So if indeed one wants to say that, well, that disputed amount, which was the excessive amount of the rate based upon what the council moved in the district, stating that we would be paying and what we were actually being billed, that difference, if one wants to say that that somehow exists in some way or matter, then we can discuss that, but at the same time, so that the record is very clear, the town of Mangonia has no debt at all that is in the arrears as far as we're concerned, according to our records.
Okay, so Mr. Evans.
Yeah, Madam Chair, just to provide some additional clarity with respect to that, is that the agreement that was entered into a couple of years back was a $50,000 lump sum payment and then a new rate of $6.06. As a result of that agreement, there was a balance that was owed at that particular time, and that with the remaining part of that balance was in essence wiped away as a result of the agreement. However, staff has been applying what that $50,000 lump sum, because I think the balance was $192,000. The $50,000 then took that down to $148,000 and change or what have you, and then what monies have been collected with the new rate of $6.06 was a way for us to then look to move that particular amount that is conceivably written off down. And so it's to show the board and the public that as a part of the relationship where we have gone and what the entirety of the relationship is. So we didn't want to not show that and refresh the board's memory, because it has been 2 years almost since we've had this conversation. So the community of Mangonia Park is absolutely right. There is not a balance that is owed, but there's something on our books that we show that we are working towards remedying for our financial purposes.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just for clarity's sake, Mr. Evans, the agreement that was signed in May 2021 and would expire in May 2023, would the increase of the rate ratify or clear up the entire debt of the $144,000 that was outstanding to the city or to the utility district? Is that why that rate was increased, or the determination of price?
Madam Chair, if I may?
Go ahead.
The intent behind the increase was predicated on that the amount of what the rate is plus what that surcharge is into that specific rate. Now, we did the calculation. If that rate is to be in existence for, in essence, 6 years, I think, moving forward, based on what is collected as a result of that, then that $148,000 would look to conceivably go away. But our intent is obviously to get into a longer-term deal with the town of Mangonia Park. But that rate was a rate that was contemplated with all those different factors included into it.
And I just want to thank the mayor and the manager for clarifying the record, because I just don't want it to be assumed that the town owes the city of Riviera Beach any money. Because once the settlement agreement was signed, regardless of what determination was done with the increased rate for our city to balance our books, that had nothing to do with the town. So I want to make sure that that's clarified on the record as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Ms. Jacobs?
Ms. Jacobs?
So, Ms. Lowe.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
and while Mr. Lowe is coming, just a small correction, that rate is 609, not 606.
Okay.
That's good.
Good evening, Michael Lowe, Executive Director of the Utility District.
Good evening.
We have covered some of the earlier facts in the presentation. The first slide here is just talking about history. We did, as we said here, get this payment of $355,079.79 just prior to the settlement of the agreement, and then there was the $50,000 lump sum payment at closing. If you look at that, at that time, you're correct, the city or the district wrote off $192,515. And with the increased rate, the district has been able to recoup in its books $48,600. So we reached the point where we are this evening, where we're discussing the next step going forward. Just to clarify some of the stuff with regards to the surcharge, the district has an ability under Florida statute to set this surcharge at the 1.25 times the rate to inside the city. And this slide is just going through the actual laws that apply that we're utilizing. It's also within the city's own codes of ordinances as well. So where are we with regards to both yourselves and anyone else who is not within the bounds of the city? We have the town of Palm Beach Shores. They are assessed the surcharge on the wastewater element,
but we do supply them water as well, and as the result of a court settlement, they do not receive the surcharge because of how it was handled when they handed over their district to us. We have other people within unincorporated Palm Beach County, and they also charge the surcharge both on water and wastewater. I'm not going to try and go through all of this, but our own charter and other documents that we work within say that we can't give a free service to anybody, and we must follow through on the requirements that lay down within the charter and city ordinances.
Mr. Lowe, question.
Yes.
Madam Chair. So if you can go back, and I don't know that I've seen this before. Was this not provided to us ahead of the meeting, this slide?
This slide, no, it was, we were trying to get it to you, but we had to make a last-minute change to it. I'm sorry.
Okay, so first you spoke of writing off.
Yes.
If it was 140,000, now we have number 6 slide that says no free service. Essentially, when you write off service or write off debt, I mean, essentially, we provided the service, and this would fall up under that, wouldn't it? The 140,000, wouldn't that fall up under free service?
That's why, as the utility in our books, we've been monitoring what's going on with the additional rate that they've been paying.
So monitoring or written off? Because I think I'm asking about the portion that you said was written off.
As per the finance director, in his words, it was written off.
And that equates to free service, since we did provide it.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
To defer to bond counsel, because as the board knows, we went through a process as we were trying to resolve or remedy the situation that was presented to us. If bond counsel could provide some additional commentary with respect to the settlement and the interpretation of that particular component.
Good evening, everyone. Skip Miller with Greenspoon Martyr. We're the Utility Special Districts Co-Bond Council. And yes, back in 2021, when this settlement agreement was being negotiated, we were asked whether this would violate the no free service provision in both the bond documents and the district charter. And the opinion that we rendered at that time is that it was not free service, it was service at a lower rate than what was the full charge, but because it was going to be paid out over time, even though at a lesser rate, we did not believe that that constituted free service.
So reconcile that for me. How did you say that's not free service, but you're basing on a lower rate? I mean,
well, discounted service is not the same as free service.
Oh, that's even better, because our charter speaks to that as well, correct?
I don't want to be cute, Commissioner, but we were at that time we were only asked the question of whether this constituted free service. We were not asked whether it violated any of the other provisions of the bond documents.
So if the service was already rendered, how was there any kind of impact of whether or not it was discounted? The service was already rendered. The rate is the rate at that point.
It sounds to me like from what you've heard is that the district was intending to recoup the fees for the service that were not paid at the full rate. Mangonia Park was always paying something for the service they were getting. They were never getting free service. They were just receiving it and not paying the full rate.
I'm just trying to justify, because I sometimes have trouble paying my utility bill, and I want to know what exactly is permissible. I mean, this sounds really like semantics. Free service or written off seems like the same thing to me.
Again, it was discounted, and I would have to defer to, we are bond counsel. We provide a specialized function for the district. I would have to defer to the city attorney and the city special counsel as to whether, when you are settling litigation or potential litigation, does that give you the leeway to do things that maybe you would not do in the absence of that.
Thank you. Last question, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Mr. Attorney, did you draft the Utility Special District Charter?
No.
Okay, that's it.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Again, we want the record to be clear, and we, of course, the town manager and the attorney can verify if I missed anything.
Well, hold on, is Walter over there? It's getting a little muffled again.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, thanks so much. One of the things, and not to rehearse all of the past, because this actually goes back to Dr. Sierra and Councilwoman Liz Wade. So we're trying to move a little forward. Specifically as it relates to the Councilwoman's concern, is simply this. At the point in time, and we do have just some bullet points that we'd like to enter into the record as well. Back in 2018, when the resolution was passed by the city, it declared a certain rate. Right. Now, for whatever reason, we never received the answer that when the City of Riviera Beach passes an ordinance, when does it become effective? Now, some council members said it becomes effective upon adoption, and it was adopted that night. So that specific rate is what we began to pay. However, what we understood was that somehow the processing or whatever didn't happen on the side of the Riviera Beach, and this is not an affront to anything or anybody, didn't happen in a timely manner. So we continue to be billed at the higher rate, at a higher rate, as opposed to the rate that was reflected in the passing of the ordinance or resolution at the time. So we continue to pay the amount that we understood was on the record. So there was never a situation where we received any free service or we expected to not to pay for any service. We have always remitted on time what we owed. So again, for the record, the discrepancy was what was the legitimate amount that we were supposed to be paying. And our understanding was that when the council moved and voted that that rate that was in effect at the time that the council adopted it is what we paid. However, the disagreement or discrepancy, if you will, is that we continue to be billed at a rate that was not in line with what the ordinance dictated. So again, the question that we still unanswered for us is when does a resolution or a ordinance become effective in Riviera Beach?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Mr. McCoy was first, and then I'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you. I'll be short, Mr. Trevivia. Mr. Mayor, great point. So I'm trying to figure out, in 2018, you're saying that there was an action by a body here in Riviera Beach, which
Correct.
in effect changed the rate. Is that what you said?
No, there was a rate that was established and codified. Again, it goes back, you would have the records here, but there was a rate and we paid that rate. And forgive us, we don't have that information in front of us. There was a meeting that we attended and we had all of the information. In fact, at that particular meeting, I forget the director at the time was also going through and reading through the bond issue. The bond issue, and I stand to be corrected at that time, also, as we were attending to that meeting, had categories by which the city could declare that for this category, here's the rate, for this category, here's the rate, and for this category, here's the rate. Now, your information that you have in your documents would actually identify what those categories are. In addition to the conversation regarding the rate amount, we also asked what category do we fit in? We know we're not residential, that's very clear. I think there was 2 other categories, and so what was happening as well, and Councilwoman Duncan, I think it was, stated, okay, then what category does Mangonia Park fall into? We need to establish that.
So, Mr. Mayor,
I'm sorry, Hubbard.
Well, hold on,
My apologies. For the record, Councilwoman Hubbard. And at that point in time, the conversation was that we would fall into now forget the category, which wholesale category. And we were still awaiting information as to, but just to your point, we were still awaiting information whether or not we would fit into that wholesale category.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor, 1 second, because I'm very confused. You said it was your understanding, it was the conversation. I mean, you're referring to these as if this was an agreement.
No. Let me just speak so that I'm clear.
So we don't confuse it.
Okay.
I mean, if your reliance is on a conversation,
not at all,
or a discussion, that's one thing. But you're saying that there was an adopted official action of the body.
That's what I said. Yes, that's my statement. So my reliance is not on my memory. What I'm saying to you is that the rate that we were, going to be paying is I'm relying on what your document that was adopted stated.
All right. You want to see what Ms. Torres-Sylvia have to add?
Last question, because You know, our mayor from the town of Mangonia is also a minister, so he's pretty long-winded. And I asked a simple question, and he kind of took it for a few minutes. But I want to be very clear and succinct so I can get a very succinct answer back. So, Mr. Mayor, is your understanding, you know, based on this, I believe you said 2018 was the agreement, or was the resolution, was there ever an agreement that came out of it, or was this just the body action? Because typically that would be some sort of interlocal agreement or some other sort that's executed on your end, accepting those terms.
Yeah, you would be the originator of the document, so we would wait for you to send the document to us to execute.
So that's my point. So there was never any...
Hold on, we can't have two people speaking at the
There was never anything sent to you that actually you guys accepted the...
That would be in your records,
okay,
Councilman.
Thank you,
but and I answered the question very succinctly. When February, and the adoption that took place in February 2018 established a rate. That's the answer to the question.
All right, Mr. Torcivia?
Yeah, let me maybe help clear it out. 2018 is completely irrelevant. It is off the table. It's not really a subject of discussion. The same reason that the Mangonia Park attorney mentioned the settlement agreement resolved the $50,000, $200,000 dispute. This settlement agreement says very clearly that this is a release of any cause or any matter arising in any way aggravating the subject matter of this dispute. Well, the subject matter of the dispute was a 2018 issue and the rates. So 2018, that's in the rearview mirror. You're here to negotiate a new agreement based on 2023. To look back at 2018 violates the settlement agreement, which says we have resolved all disputes relating to the past. So hopefully that puts that to rest, and we're not going to keep talking about 2018 because we resolved that already. We went through that for a year, almost went to arbitration. Let's not go back over ground that we have settled and released, and we gave them $150,000 credit to get that release.
Oh, so that's a new terminology, credit. So first we went to free service.
I'm not going to use I shouldn't use the word credit.
Credit. So, Mr. Tresivi, thank you for that. But I want to have some historical background because when I was reading these documents, which I still haven't found something in February, well, I haven't found anything in 2018. Now I have a reference point. I'll go look in February. But certainly, I want to understand how there's a confusion about what this actual balance accrued from. Even though we're past that point, I beg to differ because I'm not sure that, you know, you said credit. This gentleman here has referenced written off and also shared the slide number 6 that says free service. So whether you consider it or not, right, it inured to their benefit and they didn't pay the fair market value based off of what was established. I think, and if it's based on an agreement that they say they never executed or something that they never seen, I just kind of want to know how we arrived here, Mr. Specific.
And honestly, we spent so much time getting ready for an arbitration about the 2018 conversations, the board meetings. It was a joint meeting, then there was a separate meeting, that we wanted to put that to bed, just as we wanted to put to bed the issue of the dispute. So when you reach a settlement agreement and everybody signs a release and says that issue is resolved, 5 years later, 2023, why are we still talking about it? My advice is you don't talk about that. You talk about today, and you talk about what's the fair rate today, because whatever happened in 2018 has been settled and resolved. Let's not reopen a wound that took us a long time to resolve.
Thank you for that, but don't patronize me.
I'm not.
And here's why. Mr. Torcivia, when that item came in 2021 to the Utility Special District Board, I don't recall you being at that meeting. If you were, I don't recall any conversations because, you know, what I found out after the fact was that our charter specifically says if there is an issuance of free service, it has to be a majority plus one. That never occurred, Mr. Torcivia. You've referred to it as credit. This gentleman has referred to it as writing it off. And then also there's this suggestion of free service. Free service by definition in our charter has to be done and achieved only by a finding and a majority plus one. So you may be very familiar with this. You guys have had several conversations, but us as a body, we've only seen this item one time. And it was one specific resolution, a resolution for a settlement agreement, a settlement writing off, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars in wastewater services, when, from my understanding, that's not permitted at all by the charter. So for you to suggest that it's in the past, I beg to differ, because we didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about it. In fact, we spent more time today talking about it than we did in 2021. So, you know, I just asked for a little latitude because I'm not even sure what any of these items that the mayor was referring to. So I just wanted to get some clarification. Now, certainly we can look towards the future, but I don't want to be dismissed as it's apparently irrelevant to even have that discussion when I think it's very germane.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
With respect to the $144,000 and just having some conversation with finance, the incremental rate increase that is different from what the town of Mangonia Park has been paying since the agreement in 2021 and what the city of Riviera Beach resident pays, that incremental rate is utilized to pay that amount of that 144. The $50,000 was received to take that balance of 192 down. Since then, and staff has provided that $48,000 of the rate that has been levied to the town of Mangonia Park has gone towards that 144. And the finance department did confirm that that incremental rate does go towards that. So there is a provision, or there is a process whereby that amount is, the funds from that is utilized to pay that amount. So I did want to provide clarity with regards to that, and I just confirmed that with the finance department.
Okay. All right. Who's continuing?
I did do a quick comparison within other utilities that are...
Can you pull the mic up, Mr. Lowe?
Sorry, yes. Other utilities that are connected to the East Central Regional Wastewater Treatment Facility, which is the one we use. The Riviera Beach outside the city rate is $5.82. West Palm Beach is $5.49, but Lake Worth Beach is $6.85. So we're in the middle, really, in terms of what we're charging for outside the boundaries of the city. I would also like to point out that it's not reflected yet in any rates, and we are studying rates now, but the ECR payments that the district is required to make did go up 34% last year, even though we haven't yet passed any of that on to any of our customers. So in conclusion, the surcharge is assessed consistently across all of our customers. The revenues generated are included and expected to be collected in our rate study, and more importantly, the financial feasibility report prepared in support of the $40 million worth of bonds issued in 2016. And the district, you can call it debt, what we're doing is we're slowly collecting, as the manager just mentioned, we are with the slight increase, incremental increase above our base rate, you are slowly paying down the amount that was outstanding at the time of the settlement.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
It is now 6:45 and we don't have any public comment cards, and acceptance of public comment cards are now closed.
All right, thank you.
Madam
You're
Chair.
welcome.
Yes.
So, Mr. Lowe, let's just clarify this again. In conclusion, you're saying we're still intending on collecting the $143,000 despite what Mr. Tercivia said?
What I'm saying is that if you looked at the original amount of money that we wrote down when the settlement was made, the incremental increase that was negotiated at the time has paid off $48,600 approximately. And so if you go back to the original amount then, you can see that it's this lesser amount I'm showing here.
Right. So two things. Even if you consider this incremental amount, and Mr. Tercivia, if I can get your attention on this incremental amount in that 2021 settlement agreement was how much? Does anybody recall what that?
27 cents, I believe.
What was the total? $5 and?
From 582 to 609, I think it is. Yeah.
So this resolution that authorized the settlement agreement, it settled the debt and it set a new rate? Is that my understanding, Ms. Nguyen?
Yes.
Okay. So aren't those mutually exclusive? Because, you know, our charter specifically calls out when we set various rates and rate classes that there has to be a finding and a study that supports it. So I would make the argument that those are mutually exclusive. The rate that we set for not just the town of Mangonia Park, but for whatever organization, municipality, whatever group is within that class gets assigned that rate. And just for example's sake, we'll say rate A. If they get set rate A, or we establish rate A for that class, how is that the same thing in collecting monies that's already owed from previous? It seems like those are certainly mutually exclusive.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
the rates that we charge everyone else were as a result of the rate study. The rate that Mangonia Park pays is as a result of a negotiated settlement agreement that they agreed to pay in an attempt to reduce the debt and settle this matter. And I think that, kind of piggybacking on what Mr. Torcivia said, and I understand, of course, everyone wanting to have an understanding of what happened before, but as Mr. Evans stated in the beginning of his presentation, we are looking for a path forward, if there is to be a path forward, and to hear from both the city and the town representatives regarding that path forward.
I'm going to reclaim my time. I'm trying to establish that they're two separate things. The establishment of $6.09 per every 1,000 gallons, according to our charter, that's a function that has to be supported by a study. That didn't happen in this case. In this fact, I think our bond covenant specifically says, separate rate classes have to be, I guess, established by the board with a finding. So that didn't occur, and I'm making the case that even though we entered into that settlement agreement, arguably they should have been two separate items. The rate is one thing, but what they already owed us was something separate.
Madam Chair, may I speak to that point? Perhaps a question, actually. The 149 or the 143 that currently is being discussed, and I so noted for the record the advice of the attorney. But just to make sure that we're clear, because we don't want to build on misinformation. We want to make sure that everything is clear so that we can enter to good negotiations. So for the amount that was the 143.9 that's currently being discussed, right, that was the amount, just a point of clarification. So that was the amount that was discharged, and I'm using the term, we can use whatever, not to get caught into semantics, but that was the amount that was discharged in the agreement, the settlement agreement?
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
To provide additional commentary with respect to that particular item, excuse me, the amount that was agreed upon as part of the settlement agreement was a mechanism to resolve the issue concerning the dispute back in 2018. And so that was the impetus, or that was the mechanism that was utilized. So there was that particular situation was attempted to be remedied. The other thing about it, and I think it would go, it's something that hasn't been said, when we looked at this particular situation on both sides, I think both communities found out that as part of this process, if we were to go to litigation, we would have expended far more than what the amount that was established. In addition to, there was exposure on both sides. So I think when we looked at what subsequent steps would be and how we would have to spin up working with legal and outside legal counsel, the monies that were contemplated was well into a couple of hundreds of thousands of dollars, with no assurities that we would find ourselves in a better situation than we currently are. And so I think that's some additional context as to why we brought this item before the board back in 2021. And I don't know, Mr. Torcivia, if you want to provide additional remarks with respect to that when we were having that conversation.
I think, Mr. Evans, you summarized it well. Maybe to provide some context, as much as I would like to leave 2018 in the rearview mirror, 2018 there was a rate study, and then there was a joint workshop between these two bodies, and there were comments made at that workshop, and there was a miscommunication or a misunderstanding or a dispute, you can use any one of those words, between the city and the town as to what was the intent in 2018. Was Mangonia Park to have a wholesale rate? Were they to have not a wholesale rate? What was the rate they were to have? So that resulted in this dispute. And as the manager said, as we went through this dispute process and the arbitration process, we all discovered that it was going to cost a lot of money to go through that process. Either side could win or lose. So we negotiated a settlement, and as in all settlements, both sides gave in a little bit and negotiated an agreement where you could say Riviera Beach gave up or gave her credit. You could say Mangonia Park said, no, you never owed us that money. But at the end of the day, we reached an agreement that both sides said, this is what we're going to do going forward. We're going to pay this rate of $6.09. We're going to pay $50,000, and this is for the next 2 years, and then we're going to look forward and try to work out something new for the future. So that's why I keep saying we're here for the future, because this whole issue started over a dispute over a rate study and whether they're entitled to this rate or that rate. And we really wanted to get beyond that, and we're hopeful that in these last 2 years we would have been able to resolve it. But as Mr. Evans and manager Mangonia Park has indicated, they've reached an impasse, and they need both boards' direction as to a path forward to get this resolved.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
If we can also have Mr. Bullock provide additional commentary with respect to the topic.
Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Steve Bullock with the law office of Steve B. Bullock, PA. I'm one of the firms serving as bond counsel for the district. I think there's a little bit of confusion that may be helpful to just discuss briefly. And some very good questions have been asked about the rate that's being charged versus what the other ratepayers are paying and the rate that's set forth in the settlement agreement. My understanding is that in the settlement agreement, the 609 rate was essentially a base rate that is the same as all of the ratepayers are being charged. And then in addition to that base rate, an additional amount was added so that the board could recoup the outstanding balance over time. So the difference between the regular ratepayers rate and the 609 is the amount that was going to go towards the outstanding balance. That allows, and the district has the flexibility to do that because it's not creating a special class of customer charging that customer a specific rate that's different from all of the other ratepayers in the class. So the rate study and the requirements to do a rate study to establish a different rate is based on the board's desire to create a different class of customer. So when the rate study was done back in 2018, it was when the board was considering establishing a wholesale rate that would then be applied to Mangonia Park, and they would be treated as a different class of customer altogether. That rate study was preliminary, it was never finalized, and the board did not take final action to establish a wholesale rate.
Madam Chair.
So my understanding is the board never took official action to do that. So what happened to avoid going to arbitration was that the board and Mangonia Park agreed that they would, going forward for the 2 years of the settlement agreement, the 609 would be paid, which would allow the same established rate that the other rate payers were paying to be paid, plus that rate to start paying off the amount that was outstanding over time. And
Thank you.
The understanding also was that the 609 would not totally pay off the outstanding amount, but it would start the process, and then you would negotiate in your new agreement what the rate would be that would continue to pay off that outstanding amount.
Madam Chair, if I may, not to dispute, no pun intended, my good friend up here, but there was official action taken on February 5th, 2018 by the Utility Board. Ms. Pardo made the motion. It was seconded by Ms. Hubbard, and it was a unanimous vote. That did take place. And right before the motion was made, Ms. Hubbard asked the question, I believe to the finance director or to perhaps someone on your team, how will this affect Mangonia Park? And the clear answer that she was given was, they will get the wholesale rate. So what happened was the utility board extracted the wholesale rate from the study. They voted on that evening, and it passed, just to put the record straight.
So, yeah,
not to look back. But
unfortunately, I wasn't at that meeting. I'm not familiar with that official action being taken. But it was my understanding that official action was never taken. The rate study that I have says it's a preliminary study. So I don't have a final study because my understanding was that the study was never finalized, because the way the process normally works is your rate consultant will prepare a study, will present it, to the governing body, and then there will be question and answers about it, and then usually there are some tweaks in the study before it's finalized, and then the rate that's being recommended, gets adopted.
Madam Chair, if I can just respond and then I'll be quiet. So to that point, what happened was they did not vote on the rate study, but they did take, and I think the word they used was, can we extract the wholesale rate and vote on that tonight, in essence, to give Mangonia Park an answer. And they did. It was a resolution, and it did pass. And that was February 5th, 2018. I believe it's still on the city website, and I've gone back and watched it many times. So February 5th, 2018. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam
Let
Chair.
the record reflect Board Member Shirley Lanier is on the dais.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
This interchange is exactly why I've said we have a settlement agreement and we don't want to go back on 2018, because this was the whole dispute. The city passed a motion, then there was a second motion passed, asking staff to bring back every scenario. And so if we keep rehashing 2018, we're going to be in the same place. That's why we had a settlement agreement that said we're settling any dispute relating to that for 2 years. Here's the rate that everybody agrees, money that's going to be paid. And now we're at the point of let's negotiate something new, not looking back at 2018, because this is exactly what we went through for many months the last time. Mayor Albury came, remember we had a conference, and we went around and around on this. So all I can do is encourage you to forget about 2018 and think this is 2023, and what's the path forward that the city and the town can take so that the residents of both community get the service at a fair rate.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Cecilia, thank you. Your point is well taken. I think this is the third time you said that, but you don't get to make that decision. We're board members. We're asked to be fiduciary agents for this organization. Staff, on at least 3 occasions in the presentation, brought up the fact that the town of Mangonia Park owed us. You keep telling us to move away from it. I think we have a duty to the ratepayers in our community that we question and ask these questions. So I certainly understand the mission and why we're here today, but I just think you're discounting the fact that we're obligated to ask these questions. And I would really ask for the latitude from you to allow us to do that, because I wasn't serving in 2018. I came on in April of 2019. And, essentially, what you're suggesting to me that I should ignore this, right? When I have 26,000 separate utility account holders that we service that's subsidizing this, so I, in good conscience, can't sit here and do that.
Madam Chair, and with respect to the attorney's comments, so noted, I think in order for us to move forward, and I think I understand where the council person is coming from, so let me see if I can clarify. Again, my previous question unanswered was that the 144, we'll just say the $144,000 was the amount that was in dispute, right? Now, my understanding, of course, when we got into, and the attorneys can chime in here, was that whatever terminology one wants to use, discharged, dismissed, whatever terminology one wants to use, when the settlement agreement took place, that went away, correct? Okay. However, what we're now doing so that the council member can understand that, no, it didn't go away, theoretically. So what happened was that now all of a sudden we're now being assessed a higher rate that incrementally pays on what went away.
Okay.
Which is kind of confusing, right? It went away, but we're still paying on it. Does that clear things up for you, council member? Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
And I guess that's to the point that was my concern, because it's not truly going away, but the agreement is only through May of 2023, and it's only paid about $44,000, so that's still going to leave an outstanding balance of $141,000. So without an agreement on the rate and moving forward with a determined amount, the district still has this debt that it was written off in the agreement that was settled from 2018, but it's not truly a debt because it was a settlement based upon Lake Park. So understanding that we can call it semantics, we can call it a write-off, we can call it whatever it wants to be called. The district has $144,000 that they're trying to recoup. And moving forward is Mr. Torsivia's intent of saying, how do we try to recoup these dollars, negotiate a rate, and come up with an agreement that both organizations can move forward with. So I would like for us as a board to begin that process of trying to recoup those dollars and move forward in the agreement, because I don't think we're going to agree on what was done before the majority of this board was here and decisions that were made by other parties. So I think in the best interest of the residents to recoup for our side and to move forward with your residents is what we should be doing tonight, and have that discussion if we can conclude this talk. But I do want to give my colleague the latitude of asking his questions, because again, I was elected at the same time. So I would like to be updated on why we're at this position so that we can make a conscious decision that's going to affect the residents for the next lifetime that we have this partnership.
Certainly, well said. And so my very brief question is, or statement is simply this: then the amount that's in dispute somehow at this point in time during this conversation has not been discharged. We're paying on it. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, that would be, I guess, staff to answer that.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
The $143,900 we still have on our books, and the incremental increase that is provided in the rate at that 609, staff is utilizing those monies to pay down that particular amount that is on our books.
Thanks. So noted. Thanks.
Madam Chair.
But Madam Chair, if I may, that's an internal process that we as the city have chosen to do. It's separate and apart from really this discussion, because that's an accounting process that we're doing. There was nothing that, as a city or as a staff, we could have utilized that for other things, but we chose to utilize that incremental increase to pay down that amount. So I do want to say that that's an internal process versus a situation where it's subject for subsequent discussions and negotiations on how we operate and handle, debt or what have you.
Mr. Lawson.
Thank you, and that's what I wanted the clarity. Thank you, Mr. Evans, for that's an internal process. So that is going to be City of Riviera Beach House business for us to determine how we clean up that dollar amount and what we determine. So again, if I can ask if we can move forward with discussion of how we can continue to build this relationship moving forward after we've settled this, because internally that 144. My question back to staff would be, and this will be our discussion again, what happens if we do not come to an agreement in regards to the agreed rate moving forward? What do we do internally with that $143,000, since that is still something that we have on the books?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
Obviously, the intent behind the meeting is to get clarity and direction from the board as to how you would like for us to proceed. The concern I think that everyone would have is a situation whereby the agreement expires and the town of Mangonia Park takes a position whereby they send us checks at a lower amount, and it is at the $5 and change rate that they believe was provided for plus inflation or whatever it is, or even going back to the rate that you saw of $5.82. That would have, of course, a budgetary impact and an adverse impact, and create for a situation whereby it would get us back in a situation where we would have to pursue legal actions, and obviously that's not our intent. And in the spirit of transparency, when we started having the conversation about the rate and what the rate would be, it's easier to negotiate and move forward as a rate of 609 for subsequent long-term deal than a situation where we didn't want to use $5.82 as a starting point. From staff's perspective, if we had a rate of 609, we figured that that was going to be conceivably the new baseline rate, and then a longer-term agreement would contemplate increases on that. And so we said, as a utility operation, that we stand to benefit from that new rate that was established in 2021. The other side of it is the manager and I had copious amounts of discussions concerning how can we try to land this particular situation. We discussed the opportunity to work jointly on capital investment projects. Are there opportunities for redevelopment where jointly we can make improvements to the system, and the city and the end users would benefit from that. And as a result of that, then there could be some, concessions that are provided. We also talked about the possibility and feasibility of the city of Riviera Beach looking to be the exclusive utility provider, not just on the wastewater side, because what we do is basically we collect the wastewater, it goes through our pipes, and it goes to the ECR. But obviously, we know that there's additional connections that are going to be provided for on the wastewater side, but also the discussion moved over to talk about water utility. Is there an opportunity with the city of Riviera Beach entertaining the construction of a new water treatment plant to the tune of anywhere from $120 to $160 million? Is there an opportunity for us to be the utility provider? With the new federal regulations that have gone into place concerning PFAS, you would be hard-pressed for large, medium to large entities to be able to comply with the new federal regulations, and the cost associated with those increases for a small utility is going to be significant. So we had the conversation, is there an opportunity to enter into an agreement where we assume the responsibility associated with not just the wastewater but the water side, and enter into a revenue sharing component where both communities can benefit from the relationship. Obviously, that didn't get any more traction, and so we have thrown out ideas and concepts, had multiple conversations, even discussions that have, I believe Mr. Metcalf driving somewhere, or me driving somewhere, and we have an idea and just want to bounce it off one another. And so we really need clarity as to how the board wishes to proceed, and at least provide us for a framework as to what a new agreement will look like. I believe, and having discussions with staff, is that based on the cost, the sheer cost, and what would have to occur for the town of Mangonia Park to interconnect with another community for the service, it would be pretty costly and be cost prohibitive for the community. And so we're trying to find that delicate balance to not have a great deal but a good deal where both entities can look to move forward. But the concern I do have is a situation whereby if no parameters are set in place and that agreement expires, then there's a situation where we're not in a good point, I think, both parties, and then we have to go down the legal route to secure the issue. And so if it's the board want to establish a timeline for us or a time frame for us to negotiate, if it's additional work that needs to be done on the staff side, we'll do it. We even talked about the conversation to Councilperson McCoy's point, conduct a study. What is the benefit to the users of the system and the system in and of itself to provide for a wholesale rate? And so that was something that, we said if you're asking the city to entertain that study, but you're asking for the rate, you should pay for the study. And if the study comes back, then the city has an opportunity to take a look at the study and see how does it benefit the system and the user. So it is a pretty complicated process, but that's why we need direction and clarity from the board as to how do you wish for us to proceed on both parties' part so we can try to move the day.
All right.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So, Mr. Evans, do we know, or is finance able to provide us what our residential class customers pay for wastewater per 1,000 gallons?
Yes, we can provide that. So residential for 1,000 gallons is $2.82, and commercial is $5.07 per 1,000 gallons.
282 and $5.07?
Yes.
So, Mr. Evans, you stated we're at $6.09 currently, and you wanted that to be the starting point for our negotiations with town of Mangonia Park?
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
That would be my starting point. When we had the conversations, when we were trying to negotiate during that 2-year period, I wouldn't go back to the 582, I would start at the 609.
And that's inclusive of the 25%, the $6.09 that we're at now?
Yes.
Okay. So our best situation, so I guess they're somewhere above what the commercial rate pays. If the commercial rate is currently $5.09, then the town of Mangonia Park is paying a little more than our commercial customers.
I'm sorry, Councilman, can you repeat your question?
Yes, sir. So I think I heard you say $5.07 was the commercial rate for wastewater for every 1,000 gallons?
Correct, for inside the city of Riviera Beach, yes, sir.
Okay, so the town of Mangonia Park is paying $6.09, and 25% is that is the surcharge. Let me get my.
No, Councilperson. You want to take?
There you go.
Okay, the commercial rates that are
State your name
outside.
for the record, please.
Paula Stevens Keith. Okay, so we have inside city limits and outside city limits. So inside city limits is 507, but outside city limits is 634 for commercial accounts. That's what they're paying now.
So 634, that's 609 plus the 25%?
No. Mangonia is paying the 584 plus 25 cents. So that's supposed to go towards the back bill. So they're not paying the rate that everyone else is paying. They are just stopped at the 584. They never got the increases as we went along in 2019.
Okay, so Mr. Evans, can you explain, so obviously if you want to use $6.09 as a starting point, what are they offering up in exchange for that? I mean, are they offering a counter offer somewhere between our commercial rate and between 507 and 609?
Councilperson, Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
We haven't really even gotten to the meat and potatoes as it relates as what rates would be palatable for both entities, and the manager can attest because of the situation, and I think we've all talked about it quite extensively back in 2018, the pretense or the thought process that there was going to be some type of other class that was created. And so we have not been able to throw out a rate that says, $6.50 is your community amenable to that because of the situation that we went back in 2018. And Mr. Manager, I don't know if you want to provide some additional commentary to that.
I think that's correct, sir.
Follow up.
Go ahead.
Mr. Lowe or Mr. Jonathan Evans, I think it's probably going to miss Mr. Lowe's question, but I'll go ahead and throw it out there. How many lift stations do we use to transport waste services from Mangonia to ECR? How many lift stations are affected by that?
I'd have to defer to Mr. Lowe, but I'm definitely going to get the answer to that question because I wish I would have known it.
I would have difficulty in getting that exactly right. It definitely has to go through some of our, probably lift station 50, which is our biggest repump station that had to be rebuilt recently.
Okay. And of that $40 million 2016 bond that came up earlier, those dollars, some of those dollars were set aside for lift stations replacement?
I believe lift station 10, which is out on the island, and lift station 50, those were the two big projects that were undertaken, as well as the work on the water plant itself.
So the $40 million is inclusive of water side of the distribution side as well as wastewater?
The water plant, yes. And there's some funds still that we still have. We're looking at some of the crossings, but we did spend money on 2 new large lift stations.
Okay, Madam Chair, that's all I have relative to those questions. I do want to kind of know or have an idea what they're going to suggest as an alternative when the other members, finish.
All right. Anyone on Mangonia side would like to provide input? Mr. Lawson?
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Evans, timeline and cost to complete a rate study. Do we have an estimated cost of what a new rate study would be? And what timeline it would take to complete?
Madam Chair, and if I may, I believe the rate study is nearing its completion and should be something that the board will consider, and I have to defer to Mr. Lowe, but I think probably in the next 30 to 45 days, the rate study that we're currently underway for water and sewer.
Yes, we do hope to start getting some numbers back by then.
One of the things that was missing, and we just finalized that, is the treatment process that we're contemplating for the water treatment plant. And so that decision was made last week. And so now we've gotten all the analysis that supports that treatment process. And so now they're going to plug that in. So probably in the next 30 to 45 days, that will be something that will be coming to the board, and also facilitating the public charrettes to talk about rates and the utility plan and what have you.
I have a few follow-ups, but I'll wait on us to continue the discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right.
If no one wants to answer, let me just provide some additional questions in response to Councilperson Lawson. Mr. Evans, even with the rate study that may suggest or, may provide a basis or justification for us charging a certain amount, that's just purely advisory, right? That's just a baseline. That doesn't set for anything for that matter. I mean, I don't even think it's a opinion per se.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
Yes, the rate study just provides for what rates they recommend based on the cost for the services, where they see inflation, and where they see your utility district moving. And so that is advisory. It doesn't require the board to adopt a certain rate or accept a certain rate. You do have the flexibility and latitude as a sovereign government entity to be able to set the rates that you think are appropriate. Now, there are situations, certain rates that you may have to have as a baseline for the purposes of if you're going out to the bond market or looking to fund certain projects and initiatives that you need to build up the capital necessary to facilitate debt service payments. But yes, it is a opinion based on multiple factors, but you have the ability to alter or change or modify that within reason.
All right.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
If I may, I think we have a council member that would like to ask a question.
Just state your name for the record.
Alicia Buchanan Webb. Madam Chair, I wanted to ask someone from utility if they could give us a detailed description as to what happened once it comes on your side. How many lift stations? I think I heard the question, but based on his response, I think it was just one I heard. So I was trying to figure out exactly how many lift stations, and if you could just walk us through the process of it coming through prior to, I think, when it came to you guys, and I think you said it goes to West Palm Beach?
Michael Lowe again, Executive Director. The line, it's not just the lift station. We've got the line all the way to the East Central Regional Wastewater Plant. We've actually got some major work to do there where we have to take the line, which is currently running over the top of M Canal, which is the feed line to the city of West Palm Beach for their drinking water, and we're going to put it underneath that canal in order to protect their line. So anything that's associated with getting everything from this city all the way over to the ECR is involved, yes.
Is this something you're working on? I was trying to get the process that was being used now or before. You said you're going to move a line. Is that something that, what you're describing is something that's going to be?
Goes into major pumping stations, which then pump, I don't know the exact distance, but it's more than a mile, across to the East Central Regional Plant, where it goes through its own meter and feeding their plant. They have 5 different owners.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Madam Chair, if I may, one last question. The rate study that's being talked about, does that include wholesale rate? I think the one that's being worked on, or I think it's going to be presented in a matter of weeks. No wholesale rate.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
It is my understanding that the rate study does not have a wholesale rate that was studied. It looked at residential, commercial, industrial, or what have you.
Okay.
So, follow up, Madam Chair, to that. So, Mr. Evans, that's a great point. So even if that rate study comes back and tells us, which I think we're already estimating, at least from what we've seen in 2020, that there was going to be a 30% increase on water services alone. And I'm not sure if that's going to be the same for wastewater, but certainly water services alone is going to be 30%. And that's just not because we want to charge more. That's what it costs to maintain our system and for the necessary R&R. Ms. Reynolds, is that it? Renew and replacement?
Yeah.
So that's for the actual upkeep of the actual system. But if we consider a rate study that may come in at 37% for our, let's just say our residential water customers, simultaneously there's going to also be a rate study that's going to be associated with wastewater as well, correct?
Madam Chair, if I may?
Yes.
Yes, it will be all encompassing, water and sewer.
So, in just hypothetical, if they come back at a 25% increase for wastewater services, so we're going to go from our residential services from $2.82 and increase that by 25% for our in-city residential customers, hypothetically. So even if we have an answer from them, I think it certainly is premature to suggest that we're going to begin negotiations if we're already going to have to anticipate increasing it for our in-city customers. I mean, if we go up 25%, I mean, at a very minimum, the town of Mangonia Park can expect that same increase. Would you agree, Mr.?
Madam Chair?
I mean, that's at a minimum just to keep our system.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
It would be staff's recommendation that you would draft the contract that allows for those increases that are provided to all ratepayers as your annual increases, whether it's or on the wastewater side, because that's the only service that they get from the city of Riviera Beach. So the agreement will be structured that, you know, every year or what have you, or whenever those increases are contemplated, that would be provided for in the agreement.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I wasn't sure if there was additional questions.
Go ahead.
Okay, just a couple of questions. What percentage of the actual wastewater transmitted through your lines would you attribute to Mangonia Park? Just in percentages, educated guess if you don't have the actual information.
Sorry, I don't actually have that number to hand here.
Okay. At one point, I know it was about 12 to 15%. I may have been less than that, I think. It was actually 2%. I was shooting high, 2 to 3%.
Previous director gave us that.
I think at a
Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
Also, one of the things that we have to all consider with respect to utilities and the provision of utility services, you know, the rates associated with what persons pay is contemplated for the capital investment that's in the ground to be able to operate the utilities. I believe we had a slide that said that there was 34% increases that we received as a result of operational changes or investments that need to be made at the ECR. And Mr. Lowe, if you can provide some additional commentary, we are on the ECR board and voted in opposition of their budget increase, and we also changed the way in which we funded them this year, and the board remembers that as part of the budget process because we did not agree that there should be such an increase without having an opportunity for government entities to be able to prepare accordingly. I don't think that's a mechanism that we can utilize this year for this budget process, but we all know that the cost for goods, services, and commodities has increased exponentially. We anticipate, and Mr. Lowe, if you can provide some additional comments as to who's on the board and what are we expecting from the ECR, because the services are not getting cheaper, and you can't build a wastewater treatment facility here in Palm Beach County. And so we are all at the mercy of what the ECR board comes up with, some of the prices, and then we have, as part of our charter, requirements to make investments and have certain monies available for the provision of utility services. And so, you know, a lot of the costs are hard costs that the service is there, You want the service to remain there, and there's fixed costs associated with that. Mr. Lowe, if you want to speak to that, because I think it's germane to the conversation that we're trying to have.
Yes, Mr. Evans. Yes, I'm on the ECR board. There are actually 5 members of the board. Our voting power is commensurate with the proportion of the ECR that we funded. We own just over 11% of the capacity, which works out at 8 million gallons a day. The board itself has had a lot of difficulties. In the last 5 years, they've been under consent order because they were not treating adequately the waste material coming in. High total solids, high ammonia levels, etc. Now, it's important to note that there's a subsidiary plant on site which takes the water that's been treated, does further work on it, and then it is sent out to the big FP&L plant that's out on Route 80. We had to enter into a settlement with them last year in excess of $1 million because of our failure to be able to send them material that was in specification. The board, over the last 2 years, has done a lot of emergency work in order to get the performance of the ECR back into basically regulatory approval. They have been managing to do that, but it's required a lot of emergency work on their equipment. We have a new master plan that was put together by our engineering consultants, and the cost of the plan exceeds $250 million. And it is front-loaded. And one of the reasons for the big increase this year, particularly in our transfer to the capital fund, was because of the need to handle this emergency work. They have got to redo most of their electrical backup systems. They've got 3 of their main aerator basins that have to be redone, and they have 8 clarifiers, and each one of those needs to be taken offline and worked on. So there's a tremendous amount of work, and I can assure you that in my position as a board member, I am querying, questioning every dollar that they're trying to spend, and I and others are watching very closely what's happening, because yourselves, ourselves, we're not the only communities that are having to cover these additional costs as they come forward from the board. So we have a budget meeting starting again next week. It's like an all-day session. I haven't seen, to be honest, the board documents arrived in my office at about 10 to 5 this evening, so I haven't even opened them yet to see what's proposed. But we have a regular board meeting and then a whole budget session scheduled next week. I'm fully expecting further increases because I see this in what I'm doing every day and in trying to build the new water plant. The lead times for new equipment and the cost of electrical in particular is going up 10% every few months. It's getting very difficult. The lead time now just for a generator exceeds well over a year.
All right.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
And thanks so much. And we appreciate your advocacy and your diligence in making sure that you're advocating, because whatever impacts you impacts us. And so we really appreciate that. Now, back to the original question as it relates to the percentage, because what we want to do is we want to make sure that, and I think the attorney stated it earlier appropriately, that whatever is being assessed to us is fair, and we want to be fair, and I'm sure that you want to be fair as well. We've never asked for anything. We don't ask for or accept free gifts. We believe in paying our fair share. So with that, the question was important to us as it relates to just building whatever that rate is going to be, whatever category is going to be. I think the question is important. So I'll go back to the original question I asked as it relates to the percentage. I know in one of the conversations previous to here, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whenever that happened, prior to COVID, was at that point in time, the actual amount that was being transmitted from Mangonia Park was about 2 to 3%. So let's just say, and of course we can get that information, but I want to make sure that we do, so that when we begin to build, whatever rate we're going to be building is predicated on fairness and what we're actually attributing to the system. Well, in addition to that, I understand, much like the conversation before, that there was improvements to the system. So logically, one could say, and of course this is subject to additional conversation, so logically one could say that if indeed a municipality is contributing 2% to a system, what is their fair share to help to pay for the repair of a system? Is it 2%, 5%, 30%? What's fair? So I think all of these questions are important as we move forward in terms of building. In addition to that, I think it's important to note as well, and to Commissioner Lawson's point, and he's been sitting there and appropriately, let's talk about the future. And so we're trying to get to the future. And that future, of course, is just for the record, just to remind that the residential rate here, as stated earlier, is $2.82 a meal. Our rate is $6.09 a meal. So we've never asked that we pay the same rate as residents pay. We pay a higher rate, and we pay every month for that rate. One of the things that we would like to see happen, however, and this is a question at this point, if I remember correctly, and I stand to be corrected because it's your document, at the previous meeting some years ago, someone was actually reading, and there were some slides on the projector where it had some language from your bond issue, and it specifically stated that you cannot discriminate. And of course, we've never asked for discrimination to be a benefit to us or a hazard to us. And so we're careful to make sure that doesn't happen. So my question is simply this. In order to prevent that from ever happening, and we want to make sure it does not, I think it's important that we do have a category that a customer such as Mangonia Park fit into. Your existing categories right now, we don't fit into any of them. We're not commercial, we're not residential, we're not unincorporated. What are we? What category do we fall into? So my question is, if I remember correctly, your bond issue allows you to establish categories. Is that not correct?
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, we can establish categories.
Okay.
I do have one answer to one of your questions. The 2016 bond documents put your percentage use at 5%. Okay. I just looked at some numbers, and it may be slightly above that as we stand now.
Okay, and that was the language in the bond issue, not the actual amount transmitted.
That was what the bond issue stated.
Okay. Thanks.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
So, Mr. Evans, with the investment into our water plant, anticipated increases in rates, increase of the ECR, and our rates are being associated with the capital investments, I didn't support the settlement and the release back in 2021, but I believe in good faith, one, we were going to clearly not continue to hash or bring back up the 143 outstanding. That's going to be the first determination in good faith to discuss what we're going to move forward with the rate. Number two, I believe that we have to have a true discussion to see if our neighboring municipality, neighboring town would be interested in moving forward with waste and water as well, and see if that is a consideration, and may possibly have that discussion, because I know that we are going to be investing substantial dollars into our water treatment plant. So water treatment and wastewater, if that could possibly be a discussion to move forward with. And then also giving clear direction to begin negotiations of the actual price, because as my colleague stated, the anticipated increase is just going to be a recommendation, and we will set the rate, but that gives us a starting point to actually assess what category we're going to have our residents, our commercial, and also our neighboring municipality. So I guess it's just looking for clear direction for both managers of what we need to move forward, and I would say continue with the negotiation so that we can come to a settlement agreement or a discussion in regards to charging a fair, equitable rate to all residents associated. But I would be inclined to hear from my colleagues if they'd be interested in looking at the option of providing, allowing for Riviera Beach to provide water treatment and wastewater.
I'd like to just say that apparently, clearly we're not going to hash out rates tonight. I think that there are a lot of variables that are involved with this process. There is a process. You stated that your category is not recognized in terms of what we have for our categories in a sense. So I think that we're going to have to move forward. We cannot just cut you off. We cannot just say, okay, you know what, we're going to be done with it. We can't do that. So we're going to have to be able to move forward in the sense what is fair to the residents of the city of Riviera Beach, and of course what is fair to the citizens of Mangonia Park. So I think that in the vein of moving forward fairly, that we do need to figure out what these variables are in terms of how many lift stations, in terms of how the methodology that you're going to use to be able to come up with the rate, that these things need to be agreed upon, but they won't happen tonight. I think that in terms of moving forward for city managers or the water department people, that they bring back some options. And I like the option of joint ventures. I like the options of taking care of all of the water needs for the city of Mangonia Park. But I think that we do have the opportunity to create these options. But we cannot, of course, go backwards, but we also want to make sure that whatever we are doing is going to benefit the city of Riviera Beach, and also is going to be fair to the city of Mangonia Park. So I think that, you know, in all fairness, we can move forward, but we also have to make sure that you agree with the methodology, that you agree that this is the way that we move forward, and we in turn provide you with that.
Madam Chair, if I may, one comment, or
You want,
one, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Just one comment to Mr. Lawson's question to our council. I just wanted, before they opine a little bit on their desire for water service, we already do purchase a small amount of water. We do have an interconnect, and the occasion arises where we do have to purchase water from Riviera Beach. So that is already in place, but I'll let them answer to other desires.
Well, certainly. From a legislative perspective, that conversation has been had. My apologies, has taken place before. The council did not at that point in time have a desire to enter into a water agreement. So at this point, we would just like to remand the conversations and discussions to just the sewer. We will we'll be gladly take it back to council for discussion, but as we're speaking here today, we're only here to address the sewer.
Okay, but your comment that you made in regards to council didn't want you to do that, when was that?
Previous conversations by council, the town council of Mangonia Park.
Your town council
Correct.
didn't want?
Correct,
Okay.
for the record, Mangonia Park's town council.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Mayor, that's exactly what I was going to suggest. We're here on wastewater. I think it's certainly a possibility, but that's not relevant and it's not before us right now. We need to resolve the services that they do need, and that's wastewater. Now, certainly, there's an opportunity for that conversation, but I think if we want to resolve the issue of the wastewater, let's stick to wastewater. And I think I want to just go ahead and start this off plainly, and I think your manager was already teeing this up. I mean, we've kind of established what it takes to operate from a residential perspective, what those rates are. Mr. Lowe has already went into the infrastructure part. It has to travel over a mile. It goes to a lift station. And, you know, one of the things, two things. First thing is, you mentioned this earlier, like to suggest that you guys have a proportion around 2%. Even if it was 2%, Mr. Mayor, you know, I still have to kind of suggest that, you know, this is our system. If we're providing this service, just like any other business or any other enterprise, there is the desire or expectation that we have a return on our investment, you know? So it's just not about having that proportional 2%, but certainly, you know, our ratepayers before 2004, our utility district was essentially a city department, and our taxpayers subsidized and built this system. So I think it's in all fairness that it shouldn't just be a 2% or proportional share. We should have some sort of return on the, you know, millions of dollars that's already into our system. That's the first part. And secondly, I just want to be very direct. I mean, we already know what we're challenged with. What do you in your town think is fair or reasonable as a starting point as far as a rate per every 1,000 gallons? I mean, we're already at $6.09. At least go ahead and lay it out here in the meeting as to what you think. If there's some distance in between, I think a study is probably necessary, but I want to understand what you guys believe is a fair offer or a counter offer, I should say.
Okay, certainly. To your first point, and I'll come directly to your second question. One of the things, of course, just as information, when we were looking to alternatives, we learned, and again, I would defer to the attorneys because there may be some legal issues and such as it relates to contributing and or building infrastructure in another municipality. Again, we would have to flush that out. That's what we learned, that you couldn't take bond issues to be able to do that or grant dollars to be able to do that, just as information. Now, as it relates to what in terms of a rate, one of the things, and of course your staff has gone through and they've had numerous conversations as your manager has articulated here tonight. And so the numbers crunchers, the engineers, the professionals have already gone through and determined, and a recommendation came from your staff that we begin at the 609. I would be more than comfortable taking that back to council. We can't make, of course, a decision here tonight, but directly to your question, I would be more than comfortable taking that 609. I would also ask, again, because we want to make sure that you're not accused of favoritism or anything else, that you create the category, which a bond issue allows you to do, so that if someone else were to come, if you had another municipality that wanted to come online, and they look at Mangonia Park, and you're saying, well, it's $7 per meal. Mangonia Park is paying $609. You would have already established a category so that you stand true to your bond issue.
Madam Chair?
I was just going to make a comment. Now, when you're saying that, Mr. Mayor, I think I recall a conversation during one of those meetings several years ago where it was kind of being compared to Palm Beach Shores. And that was, I think that's what you're alluding to. Because it was that Palm Beach Shores is paying a certain amount, then you all were looking to match it, for lack of a better word.
Specifically, they were paying a lower rate and no surcharge. And then, of course, it was clarified that through the lawsuit, and so we understood that.
Right. So it just kind of came back to me when you were saying that.
Correct.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And with respect to my colleague, I do understand our discussion tonight is for, or I believe your discussion is for wastewater, but our agenda item is for renewal of water services. And as the town manager stated, there's an interconnect where they are purchasing some water from our community. So the discussion would be germane to the topic, being that it's overviewing the entire renewal of water services and taking that back to the town and the council. As our mayor did state, he said that his council has already determined that they would like to stay in line with waste services, but I wanted to put that on the record so that that discussion, if my colleagues would be inclined to moving forward with possibly opening up that avenue of discussion with the town. And joint ventures and all water needs would help with the negotiating price if we were able to determine what services could be provided to the town and assist us with setting up the category and setting up the pricing for the town because of the investments we're making into our plant. Joint venture and possible joint investments is something I'd also like for us to discuss. So to continue this discussion of renewal of water services, I wanted to make sure that everything is on the board besides just wastewater as opposed to the one item that is in dispute. I want to talk about everything that is an option since we do have the town visiting us today. So making sure that we're clear. And thank you, Mayor, for the clarity from your board. But if my board would be inclined to asking them to go back and to begin that discussions again with possibly providing all water services and looking at those options and put that into the negotiation. Because it is a little premature to set a set rate, because I believe the mayor said that he would be inclined to take back the 609. Is staff okay, and is the council okay with giving that direction to the town to go back and discuss the 609 rate?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
From staff's perspective, obviously with inflation and the cost for services and with when we were looking at what commercial services that are provided outside of the city of Riviera Beach, the service realistically inclusive of the surcharge should be at $6.34. And so that's where, from staff's perspective, the 609 rate was the rate 2 years ago. And I think with what we're seeing, this is the rate that's provided, but it's the 634 inclusive of subsequent increases that may be occurring within the next window of time as set forth by the board. Now, certainly, I think the board had conversations about other opportunities, you know, other provisions of service, et cetera, and that certainly can be explored. But also, if both, you know, governing bodies are amenable to that, we certainly would want bond counsel to opine on that as well, because we want to make sure that we leave with a clear understanding as to what the expectations are, because I don't want to have another situation that somebody says, well, at 2023 we had that meeting, and, you know, some other folks. So that would be, if there's a rate that's considered, at minimum, staff would say that 634, which is inclusive of the surcharge.
And follow up, Madam Chair.
Yes.
And I guess that's part of the discussion with determining what rate we as a board want to send staff back to negotiate. And then also asking my colleagues if they would want to allow for staff to begin the discussion of handling water services holistically. We have to negotiate a waste agreement because it expires in May, but I think that would also factor into the discussion of what rate we're comfortable being at, because then staff would be able to determine if that 634 would allow for us to have a lower or comparable rate based upon providing all water services. So we want to have a clear negotiation as to what we're asking for, and then asking my colleagues if that's the direction we want to give staff, or if we just want to send them with the intent of negotiating at the rate of 634.
Madam
Madam Chair?
Mr. McCoy and then Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll be brief. I'll try to be brief. Mr.
Y'all
Mayor.
trying to out-talk each other, I think, now.
Well, you know, I'm not sure I still understand. This is the second instance in which Board Member Lawson has brought back up water services. What we have before is wastewater. And you said you want clear negotiation. Now you're talking about water. I think that really muddies the water. They're on that side of the table. I don't think anyone over there suggested that they needed water service. I think what needs to be clarified is that the interconnect is no different than the interconnect that we have with the city, with Seacoast Utility. If we need it, then we open it up. They don't rely on us for water service. They have their own water treatment plant. They're in need of wastewater services. So I think if we are at a place where we can't get any resolution on wastewater, I'd be happy to have that conversation about, you know, what the other options are. But before us, I think it's certainly premature, and it's outright not fair to them to talk about, you know, assuming their water. You know, I think we need to be able to talk about what's in front of us. If we can't get anywhere, they offered up, you know, I'm not sure what he offered up. You know, I asked, was 609, you know, reasonable? And I think we had some hesitation and reluctance on their part, which is fine. And I think, you know, we can get there. But I want to take a step back to Mr. Evans. You know, and this is all about being fair, because certainly I want to be fair. If we already arrived at $6.09 on a settlement, pardon me, Mr. Lowe, if we arrived at $6.09 on a settlement agreement from 2021 that wasn't based on any study, how is it that now you have conferred, Mr. Evans, and now just arbitrarily come out of the air with $6.34? I mean, you said you see what the numbers are going. In fact, I don't see, because we don't have a study. I don't want to sit here and just throw out a number just because it sounds good to say, well, $6.09 was good for 2021. $6.09 was good for 2021, but now we're 2 years later. Let's just go ahead and kick it up another 25 cents without any kind of study or anything like that. I just think certainly there's no support that I see for that, other than you said that's where the numbers are going. So I want to make sure I understand how you arrived at that.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
So there's a couple of ways how I got to that particular point. Having the discussion with staff, we looked at what the commercial rate, which the town of Mangonia Park has been viewed as a commercial customer, what their commercial rate would be for entities outside of the city of Riviera Beach. And that rate currently and presently is $6.34, inclusive of the surcharge. So my comments were, if there is a negotiation, it should be looked at it from a baseline as that's the rate. Now, when you look at obviously the rate study that's coming before the board, and I did communicate that rate study is going to be the mechanism that actually corrects or cures that, depending if the board adopts the rate study and the elements that are contained in it, and the board has the opportunity to pick and choose certain parts. That would be the opportunity to true up, to get it where the board thinks it is appropriate. And so obviously it's a policy that, or a direction that this board has to state. I just wanted the board to say this, to establish what conceivably, based on information that we have, that would be a good starting point. The other thing is the rate, the surcharge rate, the rate for commercial outside of the city of Riviera Beach is, we're looking at, what, $5.07 plus the 25% surcharge gets you to $6.34. If you took the rate that Mangonia Park pays now, the $6.09 plus the 25%, that's a rate of $7.62. If we went to that, or that was contemplated, our concern is now you creating a situation whereby they are, in essence, that only commercial outfit that is outside of that particular rate class that you have established. And so that's why we said, hey, at a minimum, at least until you have the findings of the rate study, this would be something that we perceive to be safe, and obviously we would have to defer to bond counsel to agree or disagree with the perspective of staff. But that was what the discussions that we were having. And it was enough. If the board has the ability, both boards have the ability to move this in any way. It was just some suggestions that we were proffering.
Madam Chair, follow up.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. It makes sense. I mean, if you lay it out to us like that, you know, our in-town commercial customers pay $5.07 per every $1,000. On top of that, the 25% puts them right at $6.34. So, okay, that's perfect justification. But, you know, I want to know how we arrived there, and just seemed like you leaned over to finance, and I know they've certainly been on a mission, at least for the last year, in trying to collect every dime they can. So I just want to make sure that there's some justification as to, you know, where this comes from instead of just arbitrary. So, you know, that's a great starting point, and I guess I'm done with my comments. I'm really eager to hear what they have to say in response to the 634, so we can at least leave here with a starting point for our team to say, you know, what's what.
So, Madam Chair? Yeah, Madam Chair. First, I'll just speak to the town manager's statements, and so noted for the record. But not to beat this, but it goes right back to the point that I've been trying to make here all night. We need to be in a different. We're not a commercial account, but we're being treated as a commercial account. Right? Again, your bond issue, the language of your bond allows you to create a category by which we're not discriminated against or receive any favoritisms. You have to be true to your bond issue. We're not a commercial account. So if indeed we had a wholesale account, which Mangonia Park was placed into, you could charge us $2, not that you will, but you can charge us $2 a meal. And we're not asking for that, we're asking for a fair rate. And to go back now, secondly, at the 7:05 mark of this meeting, the reason why I said I'd be comfortable taking that 609, at the 7:05 mark of this meeting, the town manager stated that the staff is recommending 609. So it wasn't an arbitrary number on my part. At 7:05, that was stated in terms of a staff recommendation.
You're saying $7.05?
609 was stated as a recommendation from staff.
Didn't I hear seven? What's 7:05?
At 7:05 p.m.
PM? I can't hear.
Yeah, the record will reflect.
Okay. It's hard to hear sometimes. Okay, you're saying the time, 7:05 p.m.
7:05 p.m.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Any other comments on that amount?
Madam Chair, I do also want to just provide some additional commentary. Yes, the bond documents give the board, you do have the flexibility to create a category or subcategory for the provision of services, but there's nothing that says it's going to be cheaper than commercial or residential services. So you may create a industrial or municipal class, but there's no assurities that the rate is going to come back any cheaper. And so I just want to make sure that that is abundantly clear, that if we go down that route to study it, or there's a study conducted, there may be a rate that could be higher or lower. And again, that is a recommendation that you as the board still have to concede to whatever that recommendation is.
Right. Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
how long would it take you to establish a category for Mangonia Park?
Say that again?
How long would it take for a category to be established for Mangonia Park? I'm just looking in terms of time, and I have a follow-up question to it. Just
Madam Chair.
roughly.
I didn't make out what, I couldn't hear the last
Speaking to
part
the
of
mic,
it.
Mayor.
The last part of it.
How long would it take for this body and for it to get through the process to have actually established a category for the town of Mangonia Park for wastewater services? Just roughly.
Mr. Evans, do you have an answer for that?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
the study that is nearing its completion cannot be altered or modified to incorporate that. It would have to be a separate study, and at minimum, you're probably looking at about a 6-month window to be able to get that information back for consideration by both boards.
Ready? And that was important to understand because,
Hold on.
again, Madam Chair, establishment of a category wouldn't take 6 months. Your rate study is going to take that long, and I understand incorporating in your new rate study, you're going to have certain language and such. But my question would be, the current agreement that we have at this point in time, or your documents, does it not lend itself to amendments, interim amendments? So my point is, I think we could establish a category a whole lot quicker than we can waiting on a rate study.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I may, there would be no recommendation that staff can provide to establish a category that would not provide you with the rates that category should be paying as a result of the system. So you could establish a category, but invariably you're going to want to get to what that rate is for whatever that category would be. And so I just want to make sure that it's a multifaceted approach that has to look at, because then we have to look at what capital expenditures are going to be anticipated in the future. The reality is the town of Mangonia Park is growing. The flow is going to increase. It's not going to decrease. And so that's why I said we need to be conscientious. Once you create that subcategory, and if population goes up by 15, 20%, the rate invariably will go up based on the number of connections, flow, all those different things. And so it's a lot more complicated than we can really discuss in great detail. But yes, it would have to be a comprehensive study that would look at that. But there is no guarantee that the rate is going to be less for a large user like that.
Okay. Madam Chair, we understand. If 1,000...
Hold on one second. Were you, McCoy, I thought you wanted something. You're done.
No, I'm hanging.
Oh, okay. Go
Okay.
ahead, I'm
hanging.
sorry.
So if 5,000...
Hanging, did you hear me?
Right, so
I
if
heard you
5,000
that
gallons
time.
ran through the system, we'd be assessed or charged based upon 5,000 gallons, correct? If 25,000 gallons ran through the system, we'd be assessed the amount for 25,000 gallons, correct? So there won't be a loss of revenue at all. It would just be dependent upon how much we're going to be reimbursing that's predicated on how many gallons are flowing through the system.
All right. Go ahead.
I'm Vice Mayor Sarita Johnson.
Can you pull the mic up?
Yes, I'm Vice Mayor Sarita Johnson. There is a lot of deep consideration that's being given tonight, and I'm thankful for the time that we're spending to get as clear and accurate as possible. I think there's a lot more discussion that will need to be done before we can begin a new contract. Is there an allowance for an extension of our present contract to allow for these proper considerations to be completed and fulfilled, as we will have to take this back to our council as well for consideration?
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
If it's the pleasure of the board, I think at minimum, I think as a result of the conversations that there should be some type of discussion concerning an extension, because there are multiple components. What that extension looks like, what the rate is, those types of nuances are certainly something that we can look to work out. But we can, and staff has already had conversations with legal counsel, is that, you know, we believe that in order to move the day, unless something comes out of this meeting that we can all feel comfortable with, you're going to have to probably consider some type of an extension. Also, it does provide a situation where we don't get back into the situation where we had where a lesser rate was paid because of a gap in what was perceived to be a rate and what the actual rate is.
So, well, in terms of an extension and the amount of time that you all would need to kind of work this out, how much time? What, 2 months, 3 months extension?
I'm thinking, Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm thinking at least 90 days.
What do you
Anything
think?
longer than that, we're going to have to come back to the table, because what we're looking at now is just trying to come up with rates and move forward in terms of looking at other areas. But for right now, we want to make sure that we can take care of that first.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I may, simply from a staff perspective, I think a minimum of 6 months might be in order, because 90 days goes really quick. So that's just my opinion.
And Madam Chair, that was going to be my recommendation as well, because if I understand, and again, I stand to be corrected, when we were talking about the rate study and I asked the question, we were talking 5 to 6 months before that is actually finalized or available to you.
I thought he said a month or
30
two.
to 45
You
days.
said about 30, 45 days before it would be back.
I have some information here when we were talking about 5 to 6 months. When I
No,
asked the
he said
question
30 to 45 days.
Madam Chair, just for the record, yes, I did say about 30 to 45 days we'd be able to have, the rate study will be complete and be in its final stages to be able to share with the elected body and the public.
So if we're talking about a 2 or 3 month, a 90-day extension, that would be beyond the May, not today. So essentially, I mean, you're close to your 5 or 6 months as it is.
Right. And Madam Chair, if I may, because I know the rate is going to become an issue, if indeed neither of the two bodies could come to an agreement, 3 months, 5 months, 8 months, whatever that's going to be, do we become a month-to-month customer? And if so, what would be the rate for a month-to-month customer?
Wouldn't we just maintain what we have, the contract that's in existence?
Which is why I suggested 6 months.
Ms. Nguyen?
Madam Chair, that's not something that we actually looked into. The agreement would expire. I don't think we envision a time that we would not actually provide the service. I think everything would remain status quo. But I do think that 6 months is probably reasonable once we get back the rate study, and then we have to roll it out to the community.
All right.
So we need some time in there to do that.
Madam Chair, if I may, but my recommendation would be that if there's a situation where you contemplate an extension, it's an extension based on the rate of $6.34 or what have you. Because we had 2 years, right, to get to a point where conceivably we were going to resolve this issue. And so the further behind we get, then we get into a situation where it just makes it that much more challenging for us to get. And invariably, that is what customers that are receiving the service outside of the city of Riviera Beach are paying today. Then obviously with subsequent rates and hopefully as part of the conversations, those rates are considered to be part of the whatever the long-term contract is. But certainly we would say that at minimum for the extension, staff would recommend the rate of $6.34.
Madam Chair, if I can respond to that.
Yes.
So an extension of the current agreement is exactly that. It's an extension of the current agreement, and that would be the rate as well. So from our perspective, it would have to be the 609.
Madam Chair?
Thank you.
Yes.
And to that point, I believe there's going to be in item 10, modification agreement, settlement agreement, it may not be modified or amended except by written instructions by the parties. So I don't believe that we have the ability to extend a mutual agreement or release this. It would just have to be renegotiated. So if we do extend, it would be at the discretion of the board to determine what that modification would look like. So to that point, based upon the recommendation of our manager, if we do an extension, before we address what the rate's going to look like, what happens if 3, 6, 9 months we come to an impasse again? Can staff give us a clear direction as to what's going to happen with the operation or the service of wastewater? Because we can't just cut off wastewater. What would happen at that time?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
The service will continue to be provided, and the councilperson is correct. There is no situation that we can conceivably see where you would disrupt services because it is a public health item. And so those services have been received. And I think you saw also in the presentation that was provided earlier, the services were still provided when the community was behind $533,000. And we want to ensure that there is not a situation where we fall back in that particular situation. And so our intent is obviously to negotiate in good faith and get us from point A to point B, but we would contemplate that the new agreement would get us to that rate of $6.34 that's provided for your customers that are outside the city at that commercial rate. And then we can obviously work the contract concerning subsequent rates or an agreement. That's a longer term agreement. But our goal is to get a long-term agreement. I think when originally we were talking about something to tune to 20, 25 years. So.
Follow-up, Madam Chair.
Yes.
And I guess that'd be to the point, just in having all the information with the rate study, giving enough time for staff to have the discussions, and understanding that our mayor said he would, that the mayor of the town said he would be inclined to take the 609. Our city manager and staff is recommending the 634. Having the discussion to see if that is feasible to go back at the 634 with the extension, but also determining a set timeline, because I was actually going to recommend 6 months as well, because we still don't have a rate study for that long-term agreement. So waiting for that 30 to 45 days to get our rate study, and then proceeding with a long-term discussion and agreement to be able to continue to build that relationship. So if that would be my recommendation, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if we're still on discussion?
Yes, we're trying to see if anyone else have any other thoughts.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
So, Councilman Lawson, what was that you were referring to? Is that the charter?
Settlement agreement and release that was signed 2021.
Okay. I think Mr. Evans suggested the $6.34, and I'm still back at 2021. I don't understand or even believe that we can justifiably charge $6.09, and how we got there, was without a study. It was just arbitrary, and obviously the town agreed to it. So they're paying it. So what I would tell you is I would be inclined to support the $6.09, just because if you really wanted to get down to the nitty-gritty of it, there was no study that actually dictated that. So I mean, to suggest that we're going to go up even higher, I think I don't see that that's defensible or even supported. I like $6.09. And I mean, to me, it would just seem like holdover. All we're doing is continuing in that same set of circumstances that we are, because I think if we try to take official action and vote on something, absent of a study, we run into issues of not being compliant with our charter as well as bond documents. So I don't want to vote on something in the interim when it's actually against public policy to do so. Because our policy dictates, and when I say policy, our charter dictates that, it should be at least a study. And here's the other thing, right, about a study, and I want to make sure that we're clear on this, board members. We have to know what that means when a study comes back. Because some kind of way in 2020, we had a utility district study that came back, and there's this assumption that we automatically accept those rates. Hence why we had this rate increase that was not justified, and we had 30% that was passed over to the taxpayers. Staff brings back a study, that doesn't mean automatically that our taxpayers begin to pay that. We need to take a deliberative action to say whether or not we're going to adopt that study. That did not happen in 2020. We just raised the rates and just assumed that, that was all inclusive. We raised the rates by way of a new budget. So I go back to the point of saying I want to see if we can just maintain the $6.09, which essentially is contract holdover, which is not uncommon.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Did I hear Lawson
and me, Madam Chair?
Tom? Oh, okay, go ahead.
And
then Ms. Moore.
And to that point, I believe that in our settlement agreement that was signed, that we're currently operating under, it clearly states in item 4 that it may not be extended. We as a board have the option, which we've done in the past by overturning settlement agreements, and I've seen it. But with this settlement agreement, it's going to automatically terminate at the expiration of this term. And Mr. Evans clearly stated that the rate at 634 is based upon what our current residents are paying. The mayor stated that he would like to be put into a category. So we have options where we can look at that 6-month guideline to give us enough time to provide all the information that both the town and the board need to make a clear determination moving forward. But as of May, this agreement shall not be extended. I'm sorry, it may not be extended. So with it saying May, I believe we have to come up with a new agreement for 6 months to determine how we're going to proceed. And I agree with Mr. Evans in regards to the rate, because that's what our current residents are paying.
No, sir. Madam Chair, nobody's paying $6.34. Nobody.
Madam Chair, if I may?
Yes,
I disagree.
Just some clarity. A study is required if you create a subcategory. It's not required for you to levy a rate. The other side of it is, yes, your commercial customers today are paying $6.34. The $5.07 plus the 25-cent surcharge is that $6.34. That is for customers outside of the city of Riviera Beach. And so that was the impetus behind us offering that at minimum, that rate should be the $6.34, which is currently being charged to the customers that are outside the city. And so we want to make sure that in that situation, it gets it into that range where it is fair and equitable, and we have the justification as it relates to what is being already paid for from other consumers that are outside our municipal boundaries.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Lawson?
No, go ahead, I'm sure.
So that, I'm sorry, and I may be mistaken, but that's what I thought I asked earlier. We have $2.82 in town for residential, $5.07 in town for commercial. So who exactly is paying the commercial rate?
The 25-cent surcharge for outside the municipality. So if there's a commercial business that connects, they're paying the 507 and 25% surcharge on their rate. So that's what gets it to that $6.34. Inside the city, they're paying that 507.
Okay, such as who? Like, for instance, I know on the corner of Blue Heron and Garden Road, we have Public Storage, who technically is unincorporated. Are they paying $6.34 per every 1,000 gallons?
Yes.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair?
Did I hear
Yes,
someone
Madam
on
Chair.
that?
Again, I've been requesting for years and here tonight as well, a definition of what category we fit in. Are we commercial? Are we considered commercial?
I mean, that's what it's been for some time, right?
Madam Chair, they are considered commercial, a commercial customer.
Okay. Madam Chair, just a follow-up to that. How do you
Yes.
define commercial for the city of Riviera Beach?
Madam Chair, I don't have the specificities concerning the definition as what is derived as a commercial customer. I also probably have to go back to the agreement in 2005 to see how it was established there, because that was the document, and then obviously we got into the interim agreement because the first agreement was for a 15-year agreement.
Madam Chair, would Wawa be considered commercial? A dry
Say that
cleaner?
again?
Would Wawa be considered commercial?
You said
Drive-through,
Wawa?
a drive-through cleaners, restaurant, would they be considered commercial? We offer those things in Mangonia Park, but that's not what the town is.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So this is great, right? So what do you think you are? Because
Wholesale.
certainly,
Wholesale.
yeah, but so the classes that we have is residential and commercial, Mr. Mayor.
And as I've been saying, we don't fit into any of them.
But at the same time, you have residences, but you also have a number of commercial businesses that utilize the system. So I hope you're not suggesting to us, Mr. Mayor, that because, primarily the board is made up of, individuals who reside in residences, but you still have to account for the commercial customers you have a whole industrial park over in Mangonia Park. Certainly they can't be classified as residential.
Okay. Now, if you were to go to PDR and you look up in terms of how businesses are classified, you won't find Mangonia Park. Right. If you were to go and you were to look on Sunbiz or anything else, you won't find the city of Mangonia Park listed as a commercial entity. We are a municipality. Okay. That's how we're defined. Right? So now, and one of the things that I'm trying to prevent us from getting into these sort of capricious numbers, which we've sort of hamstrung us through the years. Right, and for me, the 634 was sort of arbitrary because that's what the commercial accounts currently pay. When we remit over to you, we don't remit on a commercial check. Right, it is a municipality. That's what we are as an entity. So what just in short, what I would be glad to take back, because again, when something is said, I take it at heart, and I did hear the conversation about the 609. I documented it here. Right. Now, again, it has to be discussion had at council. You made mention earlier that about my religious bent and so forth. So in the wisdom of Solomon, to sort of go to that, what I'd like to do is let's just split the baby, okay? I'd be glad to take to the council that as opposed to the 634, that we pay $6.20 and we enter into a one-year agreement. I don't want to be right back here again. Just as information, I've been doing this now for the past 20 years. And I think it's time that and I agree with Councilman Lawson, that I think we're at the point in time that we enter into a good agreement that satisfies both customers, that's fair to both customers. So I would recommend, and I'd be glad to take back to council because our charter allows me to do this, that we get into a one-year agreement at $6.21 per meal.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Let me ask, so what is the definition considered to be for Palm Beach Shores or for Gramercy Park, those other areas? I know that we provide them water. Are they considered to be commercial as well?
The residential.
Madam Chair, they're single-family residents, and they do pay the 25% or the 25% surcharge. The Palm Beach Shores does pay the 25% surcharge. One of the things I think is germane to the conversation, and we haven't brought it up, I think every resident in Riviera Beach and every commercial entity or industrial entity in Riviera Beach knows that there is a readiness or a standard fee that is on every bill, regardless if you utilize the service or not. So for those that are in the city of Riviera Beach that are residents, built into their bill, they already pay $17.54 if they use the system at all or not. Commercial has the same fee, but also commercial does have a fee where depending on the size of their meter, there is standard fees. For instance, a 10-inch meter has a readiness to serve fee of $964. That is without them putting anything through the lines. The town of Mangonia Park does not pay that. So in the fees for services, there are fees, and it's in most government entities have, it's what they call it, availability to serve, is in order to fund the utility operations or to construct the utility operation, bond documents says multiple generations need to pay for the services that are being provided because multiple generations benefit from those services. In the relationship with the town of Mangonia Park, even though they pass their wastewater through our system, they are not paying that base availability fee that your residents pay and that your commercial outfits pay. So there is already a situation whereby that fee is not being paid. The other thing I think is germane to the conversation is when there is a category that is established, you as the policy-making board can say, we want the commercial to pay more than the residential and to subsidize the residential services. That's a public policy decision. So when we talk about subcategories, you can create a subcategory that says municipal contract, and you can say, I want the municipal contract service. If the study comes back and you have a rationale behind that, you have the ability to say you're going to absorb more of the cost associated with the provision of the services than residential. So I do want to communicate that there are things that Riviera Beach residents have built into their bill to build the infrastructure that the town of Mangonia Park pays. And if we go down and we do a subcategory, you as a policymaking board has the ability to say, and have conversations about that rate. And depending on what the flow is, depending on what the level of service is and the growth that's anticipated, that rate may be more than the rate that we're talking about now. So I did want to bring that to the board's attention.
Madam Chair, if I may, and that was great information. We appreciate it. Right now, all municipalities, for the most part, as I understand it, have a standby fee. Right, and that if you were to leave for a month and you didn't use no water or anything at all, you're going to be charged a standby fee. We do as well, as the town manager was alluding to, but we don't have a standby fee because we're not standing by. We transmit every single month. Right, so I just want the record to be clear. Allow me to finish. I want the record to be clear. However, the specific question asked by Councilwoman Lanier was, are the two, Gramercy Park and Palm Beach Shores, are they considered commercial or residential? What is the answer to that question? That was a specific question that was asked.
I think that I asked that question because I was just asking city manager the question of what is FP&L considered the city of Riviera Beach, and they consider us to be a commercial account. So hence, you would be a commercial account for the city of Riviera Beach, if that logic kind of travels that way. But I asked that question because the town of Palm Beach Shores and Gramercy Park, we provide them water as well. So that's still a different subcategory or a different way in which we would look at the rates because we don't provide you water. Now, we were talking about having that conversation of providing you that could be something that we kind of, you know, move down the road to have a conversation about. But at this point, you know, you're considered a commercial account for the city of Riviera Beach.
Right. Just clarification. Now, when you submit your payment to FPL, you are a customer for FPL. FPL does not consider you anything because they don't define whether you're commercial, residential, or anything else. They just charge you for their service, and they consider everyone who does a customer. And hence, however, it's a little different. I think your question was apropos and needs to be answered, right? Are the municipalities, because we are a municipality, not a light pole that's being built for the electricity we're using. So is Gramercy Park and Palm Beach County and Palm Beach Shores considered, for your purposes on your records, on your documents, are they considered a commercial account or a municipality?
All right.
Because now keep in mind, your bond issue does not allow you to discriminate. So I'd like to, on the record, to have the answer to that question.
Let me finish. I think that, you know, when I first had this conversation, or when we first started this conversation, I said that there is a lot of variables involved with this. So to sit here tonight and try and hash out a rate tonight, you know, I don't think that that's going to happen. I mean, we can say this is what it is because we can. I mean, we can say that this is the rate we're going to do for 6 months. We can do that. Now we can come back and in those 6 months determine if that is fair for you and benefit the city.
Okay. Again,
but let me finish. So this is how it's supposed to go. You are a customer of ours. We want to make sure that when we talk about these joint ventures, that of course it benefits both cities, but we're the one who is providing the service, which means that it should benefit the city a little bit more. Now we're going to be fair to Mangonia Park because we have to be fair to your residents, and that's just how the city of Riviera Beach operates. But I want to be clear that when we talk about these rates, we cannot hash that out tonight in terms of, as Mr. Evans talked about, a 25-year contract. Those are things that we're going to have to get into because we don't provide you any water. So all of these conversations, you know, we're kind of going in circles here. We need to look at these 6 months, figure out what that rate is going to be and what you're going to be classified as, and then we move forward, because that could also include other services as well, and it also can include other joint ventures as well. But I think for the purpose tonight, we're talking about, bottom line, extending this contract for 3 to 6 months so that we can get a handle on how we're going to classify you, what the rate is going to be, and how is that going to benefit the city of Riviera Beach.
Certainly. Madam Chair.
All right, hold on, Mayor.
Okay.
Mr. McCoy, did you have a comment?
Yes.
Did I hear you?
Yes, I do. So, Mr. Mayor, let's kind of make sure that we understand the same thing. And you keep referring and using as a reference Gramercy in the town of Palm Beach Shores. Gramercy right? That's unincorporated, but they also have commercial outfits. So while there is a large portion of residential units over in that Gramercy Park community, there's convenience stores, there's also, you have a church there on the corner of 45th Street and Haverhill, but certainly, I don't know that the question that you're asking is appropriate, because Gramercy is not defined by whether it's residential or commercial. Each individual account is classified on whether it's residential or commercial. So certainly you would not be considered, for that purposes, a residential customer. I mean, obviously you're asking for a wholesale rate, but some kind of way you don't believe you fall into the commercial category. Likewise, Town of Palm Beach Shores, we have Sailfish Marina. That's a resort and a restaurant. I certainly don't believe that they're getting a residential rate because they're providing commercial services. So the question that you're asking is not easily answered by saying, yes, they're residential or yes, they're commercial. Each individual account is judged on its own. I mean, each address is represented by, its use. Being a restaurant or being a single-family home or a multifamily duplex, and in that case, it would be a residential, but I don't know that there is any nexus between how you're trying to define that. So I think we certainly believe that that's...
Madam Chair, if I may, because I think what we're doing is we're conflating a whole lot of stuff, and I think, and we're not getting any clarity. It was a very simple question. If you were to go to Sunbiz, and I won't be rude and do it tonight. If you were to go to Sunbiz, my question was very simple and very direct. Is the city of Riviera Beach, and I'll just ask a more specific question, are you considered a commercial entity or a municipality? It's an easy question to answer.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yeah, hold on. Mr. Evans, and we need to wrap this up because we're really going in circles, everybody.
Madam Chair, I will answer that question, but I also have a question for the town of Mangonia Park. So obviously we are a sovereign government entity that's provided for in the Florida Constitution, and we have home rule authorities as the same as you. But the provision of utility services has nothing to do with what we fall under as a government entity. But my question to you is, for the provision of utility services, how is that billed to your residents? Do you send individual bills to the residents, and then they pay you all, and then you remit the monies to us? Or how is that utility billing system works in the community?
Sure. The very simple answer is that the meter read takes place by the town of Mangonia Park, and we remit the payment to you.
I don't know. I couldn't make out what he said.
Speak up, Mr. Mayor.
The city, and correct me if I'm incorrect, the town of Mangonia Park reads the meter at the canal where the connect happens, and we have the information. We send it over to you, and we send the payment that's related to that reading.
So it's done at is it a bulk, like you collect it all at once, or is it individual?
And we it's all collected at the meter. So whatever's being transmitted for that month through your lines, we read it. If it's 30,000 gallons, let's just stay with the language you use. So if it's 50 million gallons, then we're going to remit payment for 50 million gallons that came through for that month.
And so are individual residents charged by you to pay for that, or is it
yes.
Okay.
Yes, because we're a municipality.
So yes. you charge your individual residents, they pay you, and then you cut us one check.
Correct.
Okay. For the examples that you utilize, there's more than one check.
No.
For the residential services, yes.
No, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. We send you one check. We don't send multiple
checks. Right, you send us one check, but some of the examples that you proffered are individual accounts that pay individual amounts. And so case in point is a situation where there is just a distinction just based on face value right there, that there is a difference.
And again, I'm going to make everybody happy, and I'm going to be done with this. We're sitting here, and this is why we keep having these impasses. I'm just going to be honest at this point, because we get caught up on semantics, right? We split hairs, and I don't have a whole lot of hair, folks. And we won't answer questions because we know the answers already. Gramercy Park and Palm Beach Shores, if you were to go to Sunbiz or any other thing that classifies who and what they are a city or municipality. That's what we call these entities. We don't call them commercials. Within the municipality are commercial entities. We have gas stations and restaurants and everything else that are commercial accounts, but within a municipality exist commercial accounts. Not a commercial entity then have resident, I'm trying to make this real simple so that we can take a recommendation back to town council.
Sure.
And so I'm going to just close by saying simply this, by restating what I stated earlier. As the mayor of the town of Mangonia Park, given authority to be able to negotiate and take information back for consideration to council, I would love to take back that we enter into a one-year agreement at $6.21 a meal.
Madam Chair, also, when we purchase water from West Palm or Seacoast, we pay the commercial rate.
Okay.
There's not a municipal rate that we pay. We pay the commercial rate.
Madam Chair.
And I just wanted to, well, I'm coming to you, Mr. Lawson. I'm not in favor of a 1 year. I think 6 months, because I think if we do 1 year, then we're going to continue. It'll roll into more than 1 year. And the rate at which we're talking about, if we do the 621, and I'm sure the 621 is just an average kind of the 609 and the 634. But I'm only in favor of doing a 6 month. I think we need to stick to doing that and think long term once we get all of these things ironed out, because we're kind of trying to figure out the long term one in this conversation of just doing the extension. And I don't think we can figure this out right now. So for me, it's 6 months. The rate, I would be okay with the 621 only because I understand that is just an average, but I don't know that that's going to be good for the long term. And when we do a long-term agreement, we do need to make sure that the amount is sufficient so that we're not back in the same position we were in before. Mr. Lawson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree. I believe we just need to move forward. The mayor stated that he'd like for the district to create a category for a wholesale price so that the determination can be done because that's a requirement from our bond. And that price and that rate is still going to be defined by this board. So to that point, I would be inclined to support what my staff has stated, that the rate that our commercial business partners are paying is based on the 634. And I would also support the 6 month extension. I'm sorry, the 6 month new agreement starting as of May, because it's not going to be an extension based on the agreement that we wrote back in 2021. It'll be a new agreement. So I would say a 6 month agreement based on the 634 is what I would support, Madam Chair.
All right.
Madam Chair, question for our utility billing team. Town of Palm Beach Shores, do we have individual account billings for those, each property, each account? I know certain every single account has a separate billing. We don't wholesale, we don't build, there's no HOA, there's no town in Gramercy. How do we do the Town of Palm Beach Shores?
All the residents, I'm sorry, Paula Keith.
I'm sorry, speak up.
Paula Keith,
Oh.
Billing and Collections. Yes, every customer in Palm Beach Shores is individually billed because they are all individually metered.
How about?
Each resident is metered. The condos those are multifamily, so yes, they have master meters, so we would bill the condo association.
So,
but they're again at the multi-unit rate. Everybody on our sheet has a rate.
Follow up.
Go ahead.
So, Ms. Paula, the situation we have with the town of Mangonia Park, are they the only organization that we have in our list of customers that actually wholesales, I wouldn't even call it wholesales, who actually in turn get a bulk billing for individual accounts?
Well, in that category, yes, but we could say like the Palm Lake Co-ops, you know, the ones on Blue Heron. We master meter that, and that's a multi-unit, but again, that's a multi-family, you know, it's residential. So no, we don't have any other company or any other municipality that's just buying sewer from us.
So, Mr. Mayor, I think your analogy is skewed because, I mean, Mangonia Park is situated by itself. I mean, Gramercy, each resident has a separate account. Same with Palm Beach Shores. So you're making that comparison. I don't see that that's even relevant.
I didn't make a comparison. With all due respect, in that respect, what I did was Councilwoman Lanier had made mention of, and she asked a question, a very specific question, about Gramercy Park and Palm Beach Shores, and so I spoke to that.
Okay,
so there's clarity on the record.
But you know, we can certainly get you to the point if you want to do individual accounts over in the town of Mangonia Park. I mean, my colleagues were already offering that up. But if you want to do that, we can certainly send our team back to have that a part of the negotiations. Is that, you want to, I mean, would you like to be situated like the town of Palm Beach Shores or the Gramercy Park area?
That would be a conversation you would have to have here. We have offered that. And at the time, that was flat out denied. Because at that point in time, your manpower is going to come over and read every meter in the Mangonia Park, including our commercial accounts.
There's an app for that. We have an app.
Yeah, so do we, but you'd have to bring it over. Now, and keep in mind, too, that these are two separate entities. There are firewalls and everything else that relates to our billing software and everything else. And logistically, it would be a nightmare for you. But if you want to do that,
if you want to do it,
two people are talking.
We're equipped with over 500 positions in our organization. So certainly, I think if we'll be bringing you guys on with each individual accounts, I'm sure that we'll be able to figure out how to, properly staff that. So if that's an option, I want to certainly make sure that the manager can.
And so that we're clear, we have staff available to do that. So we have the resources that we're actually compensating. I would not be in agreement of taking over an additional amount to pay for that, for service that we already, for resources, staff that we're already paying for. Okay. So if it's going to be at the same rate and you want to come over and read, come on over.
All right. Yes.
I just wanted to say that I agree with the staff recommendations in regards to the 634 6-month contract. The FP&L issue really is business and residential. So if you want to consider the town of Mangonia Park a business, which it is, then fine. But I think that when we get down the road, we can define that. But for the sake of the next 6 months or this 6-month contract, I agree with the staff recommendations of the 634, and then we move forward.
Did you say where you stood?
I don't like the 634, Madam Chair.
Okay, what are you suggesting?
I liked it, the $6.09, just a holdover rate. Because I mean, obviously, here's the thing.
That's what he suggested.
Think about something, and I'm not going to suggest that they're not going to accept this, but in the event that they don't decide that they're not amenable to 634, where does that put us?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Well, I believe that the mayor did even offer an option of 621. So I would ask that my colleague would at least start at that 621 price in regards to your recommendation. But of course, you are able to state whatever recommendation you want to give to your staff. But at least as a board, being that we only have 4 commissioners here being split, making a decision that we can just give clear direction for Mr. Evans' staff to begin negotiation. But answering that question clearly, I don't know what happens if they're not amenable to 634. What's the next steps that we take? Because then that would just delay the process of waiting 6 months to not come to an agreement. What happens next? I still don't have real clear direction as to if we come to an impasse and we cannot come to an agreement as wastewater, what actually happens?
I did suggest the 620. I was fine with the 621, only because I understood he was trying to take the average, and just to move us along, I was okay with that. And hopefully, when we do the longer-term agreement, we can, some sort of way, make that back up if it is an issue.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
For the sake of moving forward, I still agree with the 634. We have to litigate it, whatever, but I understand that we're in a position now that we have to move forward with the contract and with services that are in the best interest for our residents and are fair to the city of Mangonia Park. But I can, for the sake of moving forward, go with 621 this evening with the 6-month extension, but we certainly have to look at when we talk about the rate study and the categories and the subcategories, that we come back to the table with something that the city can, it can benefit the city. The Mangonia Park is considered a customer for us. We have to be able to pay our bills as well. So I want to make sure that what is understood here is that the rates that we're talking about, it is what it is. I mean, if you want to sue, we want to sue, we don't want to go that route. We just want to be able to move forward and to have the best deal for the city as well as what's fair for your city.
Madam Chair. if I may.
Yes.
So, to piggyback off that a little bit, talking about what's fair, so we would like a couple of questions answered. I know we're not going to get them answered tonight, but to follow up on the number of lift stations that are affected by Mangonia Park sewage, number one, and the actual, I think somebody threw out 5% earlier, but the percentage of our flow.
Okay.
So if we could get those answered in the near future, that would be great.
Okay. Did you have any comments, Councilwoman? Any of you?
I'm in agreement with the recommendation from our mayor, manager, that we do, well, my concept was for 6 months, but you will have to make a decision on the council. I can't make that decision.
Okay, so, I mean, where are we going with this at this point? Because we were saying 621 for 6 months, mayor's still at the 1 year. Where do we go from there?
This,
let me hear from Ms. Evans.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
my recommendation would we would bring you an agreement that would capture the 6 months as provided by the board, and then leave the section open as it relates to whatever the rate is or where the board falls as it relates to the rate. And then when you, as a board, discuss that, we'd plug in that particular rate. If the item is adopted, then we would furnish it to Mangonia Park with the intent that they look to execute a said agreement, or you can have a situation where they move first and then we bring an item back before you. Most likely that's the recommended path, to have them provide them with a contract based on what the recommendations of this board. If they vote it up, then you can look to take action on it as the utility district board.
Okay. We're good with that, board? Everyone on the other side, good? All right. Need a motion, or
Nope.
we're good? Okay.
We have direction, Madam Chair.
All right, Ms. Smith.
It's late.
No, it's actually a meeting. They listed it as a meeting, but go ahead, Ms. Smith.
We just have a few follow-ups, just so that we all leave on the same page. To be clear, we're all looking for a document that's dated February 5th, 2018, to be distributed to our board. It was a city document. I'm not clear if it was a resolution or minutes. Can you clarify that?
Resolution,
It was a resolution?
and it's captured in minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll provide that to our staff.
But,
Also-
Ms. Smith, so let me pause. Actually, I did look that up. I just read the minutes. That was actually a workshop, and I went through all of the pages. There was no votes taken.
Yes, sir. Madam.
Okay, well, can we research that at another time? Because I don't think we can pull it up now.
I'll just, a little clarity. There was a workshop that involved, it was very similar to this, and then immediately after that, there was a utility board meeting, and there was a vote.
Yeah, they were on the same day. I saw it on, I didn't get a chance to read it, but there are 2 dates on there for that day.
Okay, thank you.
2 meetings for that date. Go ahead.
All right, the number of lift stations used to service Mangonia Park. I also have written here a detailed description of the process. One of the council members from the Mangonia team asked for a detailed description of the process that takes place with the services that they receive. Also, what percentage of wastewater is contributed to Mangonia Park? What percentage of our service? Also, bond language that talks about discrimination. They want a clarity on that. Also, I have here an extension of a new contract to begin June 1st for 6 months, and you guys will determine the rate.
Yes. Yeah.
Madam Chair, if I may?
Yes.
Bond counsel would like to provide some additional commentary as the board was discussing rates.
Okay.
So we there are really 4 different things that the bond resolution allows or prohibits you from doing, depending on the way you look at it. No free service, which we've already talked about. No preferential rates or charges for a user of the same class. And if you are going to create a class, you can do that, but you have to find a rational basis for that class, and it has to further the health, welfare, or safety of the residents of the city or the users of the system. So the 621 number that you came up with is, it doesn't tie into anything. It's not the current rate. It's not it's not the rate that you're charging to your commercial users, the 634. So we think for that rate to be legal, that 621, you would have to come up with a justification for creating a separate class, and you would have to come up with a justification for that being the rate for that class.
Okay,
So I have questions now, right? Because there's this guy named McCoy that sat here and said the same exact thing, but no one wanted to listen to me. In fact, Mr. Attorney, I mean, this is why we shouldn't enter into these settlement agreements, because what you just said, there was no basis to set up the $6.09 at all. So, you know, what you're saying to us now should have been brought up in 2021, because if we already had an established rate, if there was something in dispute, we should have resolved that. There was no basis to suggest that we had a $6.09 rate that we're currently operating under, and that's exactly why I didn't support it in 2021. For that reason, and obviously our charter prohibits that. And what you're saying here now today is the same exact thing that I said. There was no basis to justify going up to $6.34. If we're already at $6.09, we've already made a mistake in 2021 in doing something that violates the bond covenants. Let's not do it again. And that's my position. So I think that's justification enough for us to say that at least we can expect them to come back with $6.09. Because I don't want to further continue to do this, but apparently, you know, until we have bond counsel come in, it seems like we want to ignore it and just decide to say $6.34, which I specifically said was arbitrary. That's all I have.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
But to that point, though, Councilman, regardless, whatever rate that we set, we're still in violation of bond because there was no direction given in 2021, which, again, I didn't support either, at the 609. So I'm not really sure whatever price we give, it doesn't matter. We're still not going to be in line with what bond is saying.
Well, the 634 is the current rate that you are charging commercial customers that are not in the city limits. So, and my understanding from what I've heard is that is the category that Mangonia Park is in. They're in the category of a commercial customer. So the 634 is the same rate you're charging your out-of-city commercial customers today.
So I guess we're all looking for clarification. What is it that you're saying?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes,
basically, what bond counsel is saying, you have two options, the 609 rate or the 634 rate. The 609 rate, and I do want bond counsel to provide clarity with respect to that, that was a higher rate, and there was a situation whereby, as part of a settlement and as part of a process, that rate, and bond counsel did agree, and all other counsel that was involved in the process said that we were in compliance with our charter and our documents or what have you. What bond counsel is telling you now is that the 621 rate that is thrown out there is arbitrary because there's nothing to hold on to, and that's why we recommended a situation where you made it in line as a commercial customer with your existing commercial provider. So your choices are really that 609 rate or the 634 rate, because those are the rates that you can justify and hold on to.
Follow up, Madam Chair. And thank you for layman terms, Mr. Evans, to simplify in my understanding. Colleagues will make that determination on our April 19th meeting once the agreement comes back. Is that what direction you're giving us to have the discussion of the rate on the 19th meeting?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I don't think it'll be on your April 19th, most likely probably your first meeting in May. I'd have to get with the attorneys to see how quickly we can get it to the town of Mangonia Park and get it back to us. So they may have to go first, but it just depends on how quickly we can put together the agreement.
So we have to give direction between the 609 and the 634 rate.
And it would, yes, and it would be the utility district meeting, and your next utility district meeting would be
April 19th.
Or May 17th.
Or May 17th. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Yes.
Madam Chair, quick question. So this is a new agreement? It's
Yes.
not an extension of the old?
No.
So the new agreement would allow for some different language and whatnot. Thank you. Yes.
You
No,
said
well,
yes,
wait.
Ms. Nguyen?
Wait,
Hold on, Ms. Nguyen?
I'm sorry.
I contemplated that it would be a new 6-month, assuming that's the time frame we agree upon, new 6-month temporary agreement.
But he's talking about opening up other parts of the agreement, right? Is that what I heard you just say?
As a
Yes.
possibility. I mean, it
And
could be,
a new
if it's a new agreement, then,
Right, you'd have the opportunity to do that. You don't have to accept it, but you could have the opportunity to do that.
Right.
thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Great point. We don't have to accept it. So why would we sit here and believe that they're going to submit to a $6.34 rate? Obviously, if they're already paying $6.09, we can't automatically just tell them they have to pay $6.34. It has to be a mutually agreed upon rate. So that's why I said, let's just keep the rate at where it is now. I mean, it's really not even, actually, what are we talking about?
But we don't have to
30
decide on the rate tonight.
Right, but that's 23. But what I'm saying to you is this: there's no sense of having this conversation. They're not going to submit to $6.34. Period. Because it's already established that these are mutual agreements that have to be accepted. So if we're already operating at $6.09, save the extra meeting. That's what we're going to negotiate with. Unless, they can tell us right now if they're going to accept $6.34. Matter of fact, that's a question, Mr. Mayor.
Well, excuse me, Madam
Yes.
Chair, if, Mr. McCoy, if you don't mind me answering that, we can't say tonight, we'd have to take it back into one of our council meetings and deliberate. So we couldn't officially answer that.
Okay, let me speak to it because you asked the question. As the town manager appropriately stated, of course, it would have to go to council. My one vote would be no. Just for the record, I'm going to be very clear for the record.
All right.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
And just to follow up, Mayor, you did state that your charter allows for you to have a discussion, split the baby, and come in at the 621. So you're not able to, or I'm confused based on what you stated earlier?
No, actually, what I specifically stated was that it does allow me to negotiate, but then it goes before council to be discussed and ratified.
Right. So
I can't make a decision wholly. But
so
I
what
can
you're
take it
saying
back.
is,
Yes.
with the negotiation, you would not be inclined to negotiate or support the 634.
No.
You would only support the 621. But our bond counsel said we could not be have that discussion or have that rate arbitrarily set.
Righty. So let me ask this question to the he's still here. Is 609 legal if we were to enter a 6-month agreement according to your bond issue?
No.
No, I'm asking, if I may, I'm just asking what's legal, not what will happen.
Two attorneys, 3 attorneys up here.
I'm
No, it's good. I hate to pass the buck. We have not researched the question about the 609. At the time that was done, the only question we were asked as the city's bond counsel was whether that violated the no free service provision of the bond documents. And we answered that question, but we were not asked the questions of whether it met with the other requirements of the bond documents. So I'm not in a position tonight to answer that without doing some research.
Madam Chair. So it appears, and I'm telling you, this is going to get really hairy, and this is why I just don't believe that you should ever skip the rules. Because truthfully, what I'm hearing from Mr. Attorney is that the bond covenant sets forth our rates. But there is a situation when you have an exception, and that be a settlement agreement. That settlement agreement, in effect, you can circumvent or you can create an alternative situation where you can choose an alternative rate. Because clearly, that's what happened in 2021.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. Steve Bullock again, representing bond counsel. My understanding of what occurred in 2021 was that the actual rate, 585 rate that everyone was being charged was and unfortunately this wasn't spelled out in the settlement agreement, but it was the 585 rate plus an additional amount to get the 27 cents to get you to the 609 that was designed, that incremental amount was designed to make up the arrears that the city felt needed, the district felt needed to be made up. in what was being paid. So you had a settlement amount of $50,000 in the settlement agreement, and then this additional amount that was added to your regular rate to slowly pay back the remaining arrears. So it wasn't a special rate of 609 that was being created, which would be a preferential rate, which is different.
Mr. Bullock?
And the way it was explained.
Mr. Bullock?
Yes.
I think we've heard enough because, you know, the more you talk, makes me more furious that what you're suggesting, that even you as bond counsel was not aware of these intricacies inside this settlement agreement. If you weren't aware of it, can you imagine that me as a board member voted on something that even the attorney was not aware of? I certainly didn't have any understanding. The town of Mangonia seemed, when they started this meeting, they didn't have that understanding. So, you know, I don't know what happens before the meeting, but at least on our team, between Mr. Torsiver, Mr. Bullock, Mr. Skip, our attorney, Ms. Wynn, there should be a conversation because clearly I'm more confused now than when we started. And it seems like we're not even on the same side because clearly what Mr. Skip brought up earlier was that, you know, you can't circumvent the bond covenants. There is this exception that happened in 2021, and then now you're saying, well, really that settlement was a recoup monies that we were already owed, but that wasn't even clearly laid out in that settlement agreement. Nobody on this board who voted for it knew it. In fact, when asked, Councilwoman Lanier just said $6.09 is not legal. So, I mean, everything about this just really, in my opinion, is just so disjointed. I don't even know what we're doing at this point. And it gets even more difficult when every time somebody gets up, it's in conflict with what the previous speaker said.
Right. So to your point, we're digging a hole deeper and deeper for ourselves. So I think we are all, at least somewhat, in line with the 6-month agreement. The particulars, can we have a conversation at another meeting for that, like we discussed, to get the amount and all of that? Because I just think that we're making this worse right now.
Madam Chair, let me just ask one question.
Yes.
Is it possible for your city to get services elsewhere?
I'm not sure if that's an appropriate question at this point, because what we're actually doing is trying to determine
No, I'm just asking a simple question. Could you get services like this elsewhere?
Okay. With all due respect, there have been a lot of simple questions asked but not answered. I'm not in a position to answer that tonight.
So that's a no.
I'm not in a position to answer that tonight. Okay.
All right.
Thanks so much.
All right.
No, very good.
All right. So, Mr. Evans, I know Ms. Tawana was summarizing. Are you done with that, Ms. Tawana? Okay. Mr. Evans, do you need anything else?
No, Madam Chair.
All right. Well, anyone have any last comments to wrap this up for us tonight?
Madam Chair.
Who is that?
Glenn, over here.
Oh, go ahead.
All of a sudden, a few minutes ago, I heard there may be different terms. Now, that makes no sense. We only came here to talk about this rate. So putting out other new terms is just going to complicate things. I have no idea what they might be. But if we're going to talk about new terms, that's a long-term agreement. I thought we were at the point of a short-term extension, just dealing with the rate. So I would encourage Mangonia Park not to come up with new terms, because all we're going to do is continue the process. And I guess from the city standpoint, my suggestion would be if we don't reach an agreement, you charge your commercial rate of $6.34. And if they don't pay that amount, we're right back where we were with a dispute. You don't charge a lower rate. If they're not going to agree to the $6.34, you charge that rate. And if they don't agree, there'll be a lawsuit, and eventually we'll figure out whether they should be a commercial account, which they agreed to in 2005. The original agreement is they were a retail account, and they've paid that for 20 years almost, and they maybe haven't liked it, but there's no other category. They want us to create a special category for them. Well, my kids want to create special categories too, but no, there's certain categories. You go as a city to Wawa or Racetrack and want to establish an account as a city, there is no such thing. There's a commercial account. And you can't say to Wawa, well, I'm a city, I want a different account. And that's what Mangonia Park is saying. We want our own special account that doesn't exist anywhere else, and there's no basis for it.
Madam Chair, may I? So we didn't create that wholesale designation. That's something that came from a rate study that was presented to your utility board in 2018. We didn't come up with that. So it's not that we've created something and we want you to implement it. This came from Riviera Beach. So that's just clarification on that.
Okay.
Yes. And Madam Chair, can
Yes.
you imagine where we would be right now if there was a category for municipalities?
I really
We
don't
would
know.
have been done a long time ago because you have the ability, according to your documents, and I'm not quoting Mangonia Park documents, your bond issue that allows you to do that. And and I think Councilman McCord was alluding to this, and not to look backwards, as the attorney stated, but to look backwards for 10 seconds. Had we done that in 2010, whenever that was, then at that point in time, your bond issue, you would have been true to it. We could have been sitting here, and we could have been discussing as a wholesale customer, we now want to charge you $9 an hour, right? But we've had so many ancillary conversations because it didn't happen, right? And so it makes it very difficult to get clarity on a whole lot of things because, number one, and I'm going to hold to the position that we're not a commercial entity. That's not how you won't find it anywhere in any documents that the town of Mangonia Park is a commercial entity. We are a municipality. That's what towns and cities are.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yes, and I just want to thank the board for coming to have this discussion with us. Negotiations can be contentious. They can come into a point where we have differences of opinion, but I believe that both our managers will be able to settle this out and get this moving forward. Category is what the city is looking for. So in my opinion, I believe that the category is defined as the municipal agency is going to be charged at the $634 for that 6-month extension. Then we can go forward with the negotiation. So whatever category we want to call the agency, whether it's municipal government, whether we create a category, whether we do it through our rate study, our board, I would be in support of what my city manager stated for that price. And then we can move forward. So we'll have a discussion with this board to determine how we're going to move forward with our utility district. But in regards to recommendation, like you said, I don't want to look back, not even for 10 seconds. I have no time to look back at all. I'm moving forward, and moving forward, that means determining what the rate's going to be, how long the suspension is going to be, and what's going to happen if we don't come to an agreement, because as our attorney, Mr. Tresivia, stated, we just don't want to go back to court, pay attorneys, and pay fees, taxpayers' dollars. Neither one of our agencies want to do that. Let's just come to agreement. Let's move forward with a great relationship and continue to build on what we have. But again, Madam Chair, I just want to thank them for actually coming to have this discussion. And it was heated, but also I believe that we got some direction going. So let's just move forward with that.
Any last comments from
Madam Chair?
you ladies?
Yes. To
The
piggyback
ladies.
off that,
I
I just wanted to thank Ms. Smith for the reception tonight. That was very kind. We really appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. I just wanted to offer you an opportunity to have last comments.
I just want to tell you guys thanks for having us.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh.
I just want to say thank you guys for having us. I've learned a lot. Haven't said much because I'm listening and taking it all in. And thank you again for your services. And I hope that we all can come to an agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I too would like to thank you for your time, your diligence, and all careful consideration. We are definitely talking about an essential service, and we must come to a conclusion that we can live with. So thank you for your time, and we look forward to a timely response.
And again, just want to say thank you all for coming out, and I'm sure we will get to where we're trying to go. It just may take us a little bit, but we'll get there. We've been doing this for a few times, at least since I've been up here, and they are always pretty much the same type of way, but we get somewhere eventually. So could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.